Tonight, you are invited to rest, to let your thoughts grow quiet, and to drift with me into a long bedtime story. This is not a tale of noise or hurry, but of silence and forgotten places, where the sea holds memory. As you breathe slowly, picture the dark waters covering stone streets, broken walls, and temples that once rose toward the sun. Entire cities now hidden beneath the ocean, waiting in stillness. Their voices are gone, yet the echoes remain, like soft tides against your mind. You do not need to solve these mysteries. You only need to listen, to float, to allow the story to carry you deeper. With each word, the day fades further away, and you sink into calm. Let this guided sleep journey lead you through the drowned cities of the past and toward the quiet harbor of deep rest. Chapter 1. Whispers beneath the waves close. Your eyes for a moment, and picture the world not as it is, but as it once was. Vast plains stretching beyond today's familiar coasts, rivers flowing into valleys that no longer exist, and human settlements built along shores that are now drowned in silence. We often imagine history written in stone, carved into monuments, or etched on clay tablets. Yet much of humanity's earliest story lies not on land, but beneath the restless tides. There, far below the waves, our beginnings wait in stillness. The flood. It is perhaps the oldest and most universal story our species has carried. From Mesopotamia to the mountains of Central America, from the islands of the Pacific to the Arctic North, nearly every culture speaks of waters that rose, of cities lost, of entire worlds washed away. These are not just idle tales to comfort or frighten. They are memories, carefully preserved across generations, encoded into myth and ritual. Some call them allegory, others echoes of an event so vast, so devastating, that it scarred the collective memory of humankind. Science quietly acknowledges part of this truth. At the close of the last ice age, some 12,000 years ago, the planet changed in ways both dramatic and irreversible. Gigantic ice sheets that had covered Europe, North America, and Asia began to melt. Oceans rose more than 400 feet, drowning coastlines across the globe. Places where people once lived, hunted, fished, and raised their children now rest hundreds of feet underwater. Entire continents shifted in outline, and vast stretches of land, lands we will never walk again, disappeared beneath the sea. Imagine for a moment what that must have felt like. To see the ocean creeping closer season by season, year by year. To lose the very ground beneath your home. Families would have packed their belongings and moved inland, carrying their stories, their fears, their memories. Some were swept away in sudden torrents, as great glacial lakes burst their barriers and surged across the land. To witness such floods would have been to feel the earth itself turning against you. These moments became legends. Legends became myths, and myths, preserved through thousands of years, became the whispers that still reach us today. The Sumerians told of Ziusudra, a righteous man who was warned of a flood sent by the gods to cleanse the earth. The Hebrew scriptures speak of Noah, building his ark to preserve life through the deluge. The Greeks remembered Deucalion, who survived when the waters swallowed their world. In India, texts describe Manu, guided by a divine fish to safety from rising waters. Among the Maya, tales of earlier worlds destroyed by floods echo the same refrain. The Polynesians speak of land that once lay above the sea, now hidden beneath the waves. From every corner of the earth, the message is the same. There was a time before the waters rose, and there was a time after. For centuries, these tales were dismissed as myth, beautiful but unreal. Yet archaeology, geology, and oceanography tell us otherwise. When we look at maps of ancient coastlines, reconstructed from scientific data, we see vast areas where people once lived now submerged beneath oceans. In the North Sea, there was once Doggerland, a fertile plain linking Britain to Europe, rich with forests and rivers, home to countless communities. In Southeast Asia, the Sunda Shelf connected lands that are now islands. In the Americas, coastlines stretched far beyond their current boundaries. All gone now, their traces hidden beneath layers of salt and sand. It is humbling to realize how much of human history lies beneath the ocean, beyond the easy reach of archaeologists. On land, we find ruins, pottery, bones, and tools. Underwater, discovery is slower, more difficult, and often accidental. Trawler nets pulling up ancient artifacts, divers glimpsing walls and foundations on the seabed. Each find hints at entire chapters of history yet untold. and so we are left with questions that cannot easily be answered. How many settlements, how many cultures, how many temples lie beneath the sea? What knowledge did they hold, and what was lost when the waters closed over them? Did some of the world's oldest myths preserve faint memories of those drowned cities, carried like sacred seeds across the generations? When we stand at the shore, listening to the waves roll in, it is easy to imagine that the sea is only water. Yet it is also an archive. It conceals and preserves. It buries and protects. Stone walls collapse on land, but under the sea, they may remain intact for thousands of years, undisturbed by wind or fire. In this way, the ocean becomes a library, silent, dark, endless, holding stories too heavy for the earth to keep. As you listen, let your breath slow, rising and falling like the tide. The sea has always been a mirror for the human soul. Its rhythms match our heartbeat. Its depth echoes our dreams. When ancient peoples spoke of floods, they were not only recording disasters, they were whispering a truth, that all things are fragile, that time changes the shape of the earth, and that what we build today may tomorrow be swallowed whole. And so, with each culture we will visit in this journey, we listen not just for what is found in ruins and stones, but for what is hidden beneath the waters. The drowned past is not entirely silent. It speaks through fragments, through stories, through the quiet rhythm of myth. To hear it is to hear the oldest voice of humanity, the voice that says we have been here before, that civilizations rise and fall, that the ocean remembers what the land forgets. Breathe with the rhythm of the waves, drift with the current of memory. We are only beginning this descent. The drowned world lies ahead, waiting patiently, hidden in shadows, murmuring softly in the language of water. Chapter 2. The Drowned Memory of Doggerland. Between the familiar shores of Britain and the northern coasts of Europe, there lies a sea both restless and grey. The North Sea, shallow and cold, stretches outward with an air of timeless indifference, yet beneath its rolling waves lies a secret, a vanished land that once was green, fertile, and alive with the rhythm of human footsteps. Today it is called Doggerland, though those who walked it never knew such a name. To them, it was simply home. 12,000 years ago, as the Ice Age loosened its grip, the geography of Europe was profoundly different. Great ice sheets had locked up enormous volumes of water for millennia, lowering the oceans and exposing broad plains where now there is only salt water. What we see today as a wide and treacherous sea was then a landscape of forests and meadows, wetlands and rivers, stretching across the heart of northern Europe. Britain was not yet an island. It was joined to the continent by a vast expanse of land that connected its people, its animals, and its stories. The archaeological record tells us that Mesolithic hunter-gatherers roamed this region. They lived by fishing in its rivers, by stalking the herds that grazed across its grasslands, and by gathering from its forests. It was a land of abundance, a bridge between cultures, a crossroads of humanity. Though we cannot see their settlements directly, traces have reached us in unlikely ways. Fishermen dragging nets across the seabed have pulled up flint tools chipped by human hands, bones of mammoths, reindeer and aurochs, and even remnants of worked timber. Each fragment rises from the deep like a whisper from the past, proof that where now lies water, once there was life. It is difficult to imagine the scale of the loss. Doggerland is thought to have covered thousands of square miles, larger than many modern nations. It stretched from what is now the eastern coast of Britain across to Denmark, and from the southern North Sea up toward Norway. Rivers wound through its valleys, feeding lakes and marshes. Archaeologists believe it may have supported tens of thousands of people, perhaps more. For millennia, it was not a marginal land, but a thriving heart of Europe. And yet, like so many chapters of early human history, it was claimed by the rising seas. As the great glaciers melted, the waters advanced slowly, but inexorably. Year by year, the shoreline crept inward. Hills became islands, valleys filled with brackish lakes, and fertile plains turned to marshes. Communities must have watched this change with dread and disbelief, forced to abandon ancestral hunting grounds and sacred sites. Oral traditions, perhaps, carried these memories long after the land was gone. And then, with sudden violence, the final blow came. Around 8,000 years ago, a massive underwater landslide off the coast of Norway, known today as the Storegga Slide, triggered a tsunami that swept across the North Atlantic. Walls of water surged over Doggerland's low-lying plains. Villages, rivers, and forests were drowned in a single cataclysm. The surviving ridges became the scattered shoals and sandbanks we know today, dangerous for sailors, but once the highlands of a fertile country. Modern science has given us glimpses of this hidden world. Using seismic surveys meant for oil exploration, researchers have mapped ancient river channels, floodplains, and even what appear to be remnants of lake shores beneath the seabed. These ghostly landscapes, preserved under layers of sand and silt, remind us that the world we know is only a fleeting arrangement, temporary in the face of nature's slow and relentless power. But what of the people? Here, mystery deepens. We know Mesolithic communities lived here, but their names, their rituals, their songs, all are lost. Did they build wooden huts near the water's edge, or gather in circles for ceremonies beneath the stars? Did they carve idols or bury their dead in sacred mounds? When the waves advanced, did they resist until the last, or move inland in sorrow, carrying only memories of a vanished home? We can only imagine, guided by fragments and comparisons with other cultures of the time. Yet even these guesses feel reverent, as though we are treading lightly over sacred ground that lies beneath the waves. The bones tell part of the story. From the sea, dredgers have recovered antler harpoons and finely worked flint blades, evidence of skilled craftsmanship and daily survival. Animal remains speak of the herds that once roamed freely across the plains. From time to time, human bones emerge as well, mute reminders that this was not an empty landscape, but one filled with lives, loves, and generations. Each discovery is a fragile thread connecting us to a place we will never walk again. Doggerland forces us to confront the scale of what has been forgotten. When we speak of history, we often begin with the first cities, the first temples, the first written words. But for thousands of years before that, humans lived rich lives in places like Doggerland. Their world was erased not by fire or conquest, but by the slow breathing of the earth itself, by tides and temperatures shifting across centuries. What remains is absence, a silence broken only when the sea yields a shard of flint or a fragment of bone. And yet, in that silence, there is a lesson. Doggerland reminds us that civilization is not permanent, that landscapes we take for granted are fragile. Coastlines shift, islands form and dissolve. Entire nations may rest beneath the waters of the future, just as Doggerland lies beneath the North Sea today. The ocean holds more than memory. It holds prophecy. As we consider this vanished land, let the thought settle gently. Much of humanity's story is not on the maps we know. It is drowned, hidden, or buried. For every ruin we uncover on solid ground, there are countless more beneath the sea, waiting in darkness. Doggerland is only one of many, but it speaks for them all. It tells us that our past is wider, deeper, and stranger than we imagine. The waves above Doggerland still roll endlessly, their grey surface concealing what lies beneath. Ships pass over without noticing. The wind stirs the sea, unaware of the plains and rivers entombed below. Yet for those who listen, who pause at the edge of history, there is a whisper of hearths long extinguished, of hunters watching the herds, of children playing by rivers whose names are forgotten. The drowned memory endures, carried in silence, waiting for us to remember. And so we drift onward into the deeper waters of this journey, guided by fragments, by echoes, by the knowledge that beneath the seas lie entire chapters of humanity's sacred story. Doggerland is gone, yet its memory lingers, like the faint echo of a song beneath the waves. Chapter 3. Yonaguni. The Japanese Atlantis, off the southern coast of Japan, where the East China Sea meets the Pacific, the waters deepen into an expanse both tranquil and unknowable. Here, near the island of Yonaguni, fishermen once spoke of unusual currents, of shadows beneath the surface that did not belong to fish or drifting sand. In 1986, a diver seeking hammerhead sharks descended into these waters and returned with a story that has since unsettled the boundary between geology and archaeology. He had found steps, terraces, and walls, structures too geometric, too deliberate, to be dismissed as mere accidents of stone. At a depth of roughly 80 feet, the Yonaguni monument rests, vast and imposing. Its form is not scattered or chaotic. Instead, it rises with the quiet precision of architecture. Great rectangular terraces, wide platforms, and what appear to be stairways ascending from the seabed toward a vanished horizon. Divers describe the sensation of swimming through a sunken city, corridors flanked by towering walls, plazas opening into empty silence, steps that lead upward only to vanish into the sea. Some claim to see faces carved into the rock, symbols etched faintly as though a message has survived beneath the tides. The stone itself is sandstone and mudstone, sedimentary layers that fracture along straight lines. Geologists have argued that what appears artificial may be the natural splitting of rock, shaped further by millennia of waves and currents. To them, the right angles and smooth surfaces are coincidences of erosion. But divers, archaeologists, and explorers are less certain. Some point to regular features that seem too deliberate. A formation that resembles a ceremonial gate, pillars aligned like the remnants of a colonnade, and a raised platform that recalls the stage of a temple or gathering place. The monument stretches nearly 500 feet in length, rising in places as high as 70 feet, an immense scale difficult to reconcile with chance alone. If it were indeed carved, then by whom? And when? Here the questions deepen. Japan's recorded history does not extend into the times when sea levels were lower, when the coasts lay further outward, and when entire landscapes now drowned beneath the Pacific were open ground. During the last glacial period, the seas were hundreds of feet lower, exposing vast territories now hidden. Could it be that Yonaguni was once dry land, occupied by a people skilled enough to shape stone on a monumental scale? If so, they would have lived more than 10,000 years ago, long before conventional history places organized societies in the region. Some researchers have suggested connections to the Jomon culture, whose pottery, among the oldest in the world, dates back over 12,000 years. The Jomon were hunters, gatherers, and early artisans, but whether they possessed the tools or vision to create such structures is unknown. Others speculate that Yonaguni is older still, belonging to an age unrecorded, when myths of sunken kingdoms and great floods first took root in memory. The legend of Mu, a lost continent of the Pacific spoken of in the late 19th century, has been linked in whispers to these ruins. Though Mu itself remains speculative, Yonaguni gives the myth a haunting contour, a place where the sea has preserved possibility. Divers who have descended into Yonaguni speak not only of its forms, but of its atmosphere. The water, though often clear, carries a weight, as though time itself has settled there. Light filters down in wavering beams, illuminating sharp edges and casting deep shadows into recesses that suggest passageways. Swimming along the terraces, one cannot help but imagine feet once treading these steps, ceremonies unfolding in the open plazas, or torches burning against stone walls now claimed by coral. The sea muffles all sound, turning the descent into a dreamlike passage through another world. There are features that ignite particular fascination. A structure called the main terrace resembles a wide staircase, its steps precise and vast. Another formation, the triangle pool, is an open depression whose shape seems deliberate, like a basin carved into stone. Near the edge, divers point to a rock that resembles a massive sculpted head, its profile echoing the stylized faces of ancient idols. Elsewhere, grooves and straight channels cut into the rock suggest tool marks, though erosion may tell the same story. Each feature holds a dual identity, natural perhaps, but possibly crafted. The debate remains unresolved. Geological surveys lean toward natural formation, citing the known fracturing patterns of sandstone. Yet even among geologists, some admit the monument's sharp lines and right angles are unusual in scale and arrangement. Archaeologists who have studied the site remain cautious, noting that no definitive artifacts, no pottery shards, no tools, no bones, have been securely recovered from the structure itself. Still, nearby islands bear traces of ancient settlement, stone walls and foundations that echo, faintly, the geometry beneath the waves. The lack of consensus sustains the mystery. Yonaguni resists closure, existing in a liminal space between nature and culture, between accident and intention. If Yonaguni were indeed human-made, it would rewrite much of what is known about the history of the Pacific. It would suggest a culture capable of monumental architecture long before Egypt's pyramids or Mesopotamia's ziggurats. It would mean that in an age we consider primitive, people had already learned to align stone, to carve terraces, and to imagine permanence against the backdrop of a changing sea. And if it is not artificial, then it remains no less a wonder. A natural monument that mimics the work of human hands so closely, it blurs the line between creation and coincidence. There is something profoundly symbolic in this uncertainty. Yonaguni is a mirror held up to our desire to know, to categorize, to name the past with precision. Yet the ocean resists such clarity. It gives us glimpses, but not answers. Perhaps this is why Yonaguni captivates so deeply. It reminds us that history is not complete, that even beneath waters well-traveled, there may lie enigmas untouched, waiting to unsettle our certainty. The monument also whispers of impermanence. If it was once a city or temple, then it was drowned, like Doggerland and other lost landscapes, by the inexorable rise of seas. If it is natural, then it still speaks of time vast beyond comprehension, of waves carving stone into temples the sea alone worships. In both cases, it is a place where human imagination meets the immensity of nature, where myth and geology entwine. As currents pass over the terraces and schools of fish drift between the steps, Yonaguni continues to keep its secrets. Divers return again and again, mapping, photographing, measuring, but the monument remains silent. Its stones bear no inscription, its forms no certain purpose. It lingers as a question carved into the seabed, a riddle in sandstone, and so we leave Yonaguni as we found it, unresolved, half lit by the filtered glow of the sun through water, a shadow of something that may never be explained. The sea has claimed it, guarding its memory in silence. Whether natural or built by forgotten hands, it is a monument to mystery itself. A reminder that the ocean floor is not empty, but a library of hidden chapters, many unread, some perhaps unreadable as we drift onward. Let the image of Yonaguni rest gently in the mind. Vast terraces leading nowhere, steps ascending into the sea, a monument that belongs to both nature and memory. It is a place that speaks softly to us, saying only this: there is more to the past than we know, and more beneath the waves than we dare to imagine. Chapter 4. The Ghosts of Pavlopetri. Beneath the quiet waves of the Laconian Gulf in the southern reaches of Greece, there rests a city lost to the sea. The waters are calm here, shallow and clear, a gentle blue-green that conceals beneath its surface one of the most haunting windows into humanity's forgotten past. This is Pavlopetri, a name whispered among archaeologists as one of the oldest known submerged cities on Earth. Unlike the legends of Atlantis or the half-imagined lands of myth, Pavlopetri is real, its stones still set in place, its streets still traceable after 5,000 years of silence. Discovered in 1967 by Nicholas Fleming, a marine archaeologist surveying the coastline. The site at first appeared to be no more than scattered blocks upon the seabed, but as divers returned, a revelation unfolded. An entire town plan spread beneath the waves. Streets carved with deliberate alignment, foundations of stone houses, open courtyards where families once gathered, chambered rooms where tools, pottery, and offerings were once kept. Pavlopetri was not a single ruin or an isolated temple. It was a community, a living town, preserved beneath a thin layer of sand and seagrass, waiting for the modern eye to rediscover its rhythm. Archaeologists date the site to around 3000 BCE, placing it in the early Bronze Age, though some of its stones may stretch further back into the Neolithic world. This means that Pavlopetri is older than many of the wonders we hold as symbols of early civilization. It predates the rise of classical Greece, predates even the palaces of Crete's Minoans. Here, beneath the waters of the Peloponnesian coast, lies a settlement as ancient as the myths themselves. What makes Pavlopetri extraordinary is not simply its age, but its preservation. The outlines of streets are still visible, crisscrossing the seabed in careful order. At least 15 separate buildings have been identified, each with rooms opening onto courtyards, each part of a coherent urban plan. There are long avenues and smaller lanes, all converging toward open spaces that may once have been marketplaces or communal gathering points. To swim over Pavlopetri is to glide above the skeleton of an ancient town, a layout so clear that one could almost imagine its people returning at any moment, stepping barefoot across their thresholds, their voices carried once again on the salt air. In those rooms, traces of life have endured. Pottery fragments lie buried in the sand, shaped in styles that speak of trade and craftsmanship. Storage jars that once held oil or wine, cooking pots blackened by fire, and delicate painted vessels that may have been used in ritual or ceremony. These small remnants remind us that Pavlopetri was not a mythic city, but a lived place, where families grew and sustained themselves, where children played in courtyards, where sailors returned from journeys across the Aegean, bringing stories and goods from far horizons. The sea, though, was never far away. Pavlopetri was built close to the shoreline, a maritime town that lived by the rhythms of tide and trade. Its people likely fished, traded, and crafted, relying on the water not only for sustenance, but for connection to other cultures of the Bronze Age Mediterranean. The proximity of the sea was both gift and danger. Over centuries, as tectonic shifts moved the land and the waters rose inch by inch, the town was abandoned, claimed slowly by the encroaching gulf. Unlike the sudden cataclysm of legend, Pavlopetri's submergence was gradual, a long farewell between land and water. Stone foundations sank beneath the waves, rooftops crumbled, streets disappeared under shifting sands. By the time its people walked away, the sea was already advancing, whispering over the thresholds of their homes. To swim there today is to move through a ghostly stillness. The seagrass sways where once feet hurried across stone. Fish dart through open doorways, tracing the outlines of ancient kitchens and sleeping chambers. Light ripples across the walls, as though fire still flickered inside. The silence of the underwater world wraps itself around Pavlopetri like a shroud. Yet within that silence is an almost palpable presence. The memory of a community, its days preserved in stone. The name itself, Pavlopetri, means Paul's stone, though it is far older than the saint for whom it is named. Local fishermen long knew of its presence, speaking of ruins visible just beneath the water on clear days. But only in recent decades have systematic studies begun to reveal the full scope of the site. Using underwater mapping technologies and digital reconstruction, archaeologists have traced its layout in detail, bringing to light the vision of a Bronze Age town that once thrived in what is now seabed. In 2009, advanced surveys created three-dimensional maps of Pavlopetri, allowing researchers to visualize not only its architecture, but the flow of its streets, the orientation of its houses, the scale of its courtyards. What emerges from this work is not a fragment, but a whole. Pavlopetri is not a single temple or ruin, but an entire microcosm of early urban life, preserved in a way that few other sites can match. Most ancient cities have been built over, destroyed, or transformed across centuries. Pavlopetri, sunken and forgotten, has been spared the disruptions of later civilizations. The sea, indifferent and merciless in its claiming, has also been a guardian, sealing the city from plunder and preserving its plan for 5,000 years. And yet, questions remain. Who were the people who built Pavlopetri? Were they an independent culture, or were they connected to the rising powers of Crete and the Minoan world? Did they leave willingly as the waters advanced, or were they forced by some sudden shift, an earthquake, a storm, or a surge of the sea? Archaeologists have not found inscriptions, no records to name its inhabitants. Its story remains mute, told only through stone foundations and the scatter of pottery. The absence of voice only deepens its aura, leaving space for mystery to settle among the ruins. There is also something profoundly human in Pavlopetri's quiet endurance. It speaks to a truth as old as civilization itself, that no city, however strong, can resist the tide of time and the movements of the earth. Today, as modern coastlines face rising seas, Pavlopetri appears less like an ancient anomaly and more like a warning, a memory of what the ocean can take. For 5 millennia, it has rested beneath the waves, its streets empty, its hearths cold. And yet in its stillness, it continues to speak. The ghosts of Pavlopetri are not malevolent. They do not haunt with fear, but with a gentle persistence, inviting us to imagine the cadence of daily life in a world both distant and familiar. The children chasing one another in sunlit courtyards, the women grinding grain, weaving, tending to the hearth, the men setting sail, returning with fish or trade goods, evening fires glowing against stone walls as songs rose into the dark. All of this ended, not in fire or conquest, but in water, the slow encroachment of a sea that swelled higher with each generation. Now, those voices have quieted. Only the sea remains, steady and eternal, rolling above the roofs and avenues of the drowned town. Pavlopetri lies undisturbed, its stones softened by algae, its outlines blurred by time, yet still bearing witness to the resilience of human life and the inevitability of change. To drift above it is to float between worlds, the living and the forgotten, the present and the Bronze Age past. It is to realize that history is not only written in books or carved into monuments that still stand on land. It is also written beneath the waters, where cities lie unseen, their stones whispering beneath the waves. And so we leave Pavlopetri to its silence, knowing that its story is not yet fully told. Archaeologists will return, mapping, measuring, speculating. The sea will continue to guard it, shifting sands over streets where children once played. And we, passing through the currents of memory, are left with an image both fragile and eternal. A sunken town in Greece, older than history, where ghosts still walk along stone streets, forever accompanied by the quiet rhythm of the sea. Chapter 5. Heracleion and Canopus, Egypt's forgotten ports. There are places in the world where silence feels alive, where water itself seems to hold memory. Off the coast of modern-day Egypt, beneath the rolling swells of the Mediterranean, such a silence waits. For centuries, it concealed two of the most extraordinary cities of the ancient world. Heracleion, once known as Thonis to the Greeks, and nearby Canopus. Cities that thrived on the threshold between land and sea, between the known and the sacred. For more than a millennium they lay hidden, their temples collapsed, their colossal statues toppled, their harbours swallowed by the waves. Now, rediscovered, they speak again in whispers of stone and sand. To understand Heracleion and Canopus, we must first return to the mouth of the Nile, where river meets sea. In antiquity, this was not a simple coastline, but a shifting mosaic of channels, lagoons, and sandbanks. Here the lifeblood of Egypt flowed outward, carrying grain, papyrus, gold, and stone from the heartland into the wider world. The westernmost branch of the Nile opened to the sea near this region, making it both a gateway for commerce and a place where gods were believed to draw close to human affairs. Heracleion rose upon this threshold, a city of harbours and sanctuaries, where ships from across the Mediterranean anchored and paid tribute. Ancient texts describe it as a bustling metropolis, filled with merchants, travellers, and priests. It was here, according to Herodotus, that Helen of Troy and Paris once sought refuge during their fateful flight, and where Heracles himself, in myth, first set foot upon Egyptian soil. Canopus, a little to the east, was famed for its sanctuaries dedicated to healing gods, where supplicants came to seek cures, both physical and spiritual. In later centuries it became known for revelry and worship, but beneath those later reputations was a deep current of devotion, ritual, and ancient power. Together, these two cities formed twin guardians of Egypt's maritime frontier, one commercial and political, the other sacred and mysterious. For centuries, they flourished. Colossal temples rose to the gods of the Nile and the sea. Statues of pharaohs, each carved in granite or diorite, stood sentinel above the harbours. Obelisks and shrines lined the waterfront, glowing with offerings and firelight as ships arrived from Greece, Phoenicia, and beyond. Markets overflowed with goods, spices, oils, fine cloth, timber from distant lands. Inscriptions speak of tithes and taxes collected from traders, of rituals enacted to ensure safe passage through the waters, of ceremonies binding Egypt to the divine. And yet, for all their glory, Heracleion and Canopus would not endure. Sometime in the 2nd century BCE, gradual subsidence began to weaken their foundations. Earthquakes shook the delta. The fragile sediments of the Nile shifted beneath the weight of temples and houses. Tides rose. And then, in a series of calamities that likely combined flood, earthquake, and sea surge, the cities were lost. Their walls gave way, their harbours collapsed, and stone by stone they were swallowed. By the 8th century of our era, they had vanished entirely beneath the waves. For over 1,000 years they lay hidden, remembered only in fragmentary texts, their names half legendary. It was not until the late 20th century that their silence began to break. In 2000, marine archaeologist Frank Gaudio and his team, using sonar and magnetometers, discovered strange outlines beneath the seabed off Abu Qir Bay. What appeared first as irregular shapes gradually resolved into the grid of streets, the foundations of temples, the fragments of colossal statues. Diving into the waters, the team found themselves in a ghostly realm. Stone heads 3 meters tall, still staring upward through the murk. Blocks weighing tons, carved with hieroglyphs resting upon the sand. Gold coins scattered where markets once stood. Ritual vessels, still intact, buried beneath centuries of silt. Among the most extraordinary finds were the statues themselves. One depicts the god Hapi, personification of the Nile's annual flood. He is shown in colossal form, his body rounded, his presence both nurturing and awe-inspiring. Another is of a Ptolemaic pharaoh, carved in red granite, standing over 5 meters tall. These were not mere decorations. but guardians of sacred precincts, toppled when the earth gave way, yet still whole, their faces calm as if time itself could not disturb them. The great temple of Amun-Gereb was also uncovered, once the spiritual heart of Heracleion. Its blocks now lie scattered, but inscriptions tell of its importance. Here, rituals of kingship were performed, linking pharaohs to the gods. Here, offerings were made for safe voyages, for fertility, for the balance of cosmic order. Nearby shrines dedicated to Osiris, the god of death and rebirth, contained ritual boats, miniature vessels carved in stone, used in annual ceremonies reenacting the mysteries of life and renewal. Heracleion was not only a place of trade and power, but also of deep spirituality, a threshold where gods and humans met. Canopus too revealed its sacred treasures, temples dedicated to Serapis and Osiris, sanctuaries where pilgrims sought healing, remnants of inscriptions invoking divine protection, amulets, oil lamps, and offerings lie scattered in the sands, reminders of the devotion of countless unnamed hands. What makes these discoveries extraordinary is not only their richness, but their preservation. The clay and silt of the Nile, while swallowing the cities, also sealed them from time. In the still waters of the bay, without waves or storms to break them, the artifacts remained as they fell. To dive into this world today is to encounter not ruin in decay, but an entire tableau of ancient life, paused in motion. A necklace lies where it was dropped. A bronze mirror reflects the light of a diver's torch. Amphorae, once filled with oil or wine, sit in clusters as though waiting for a ship that never came. And yet, the rediscovery of Heracleion and Canopus is more than archaeology. It is a meditation on impermanence. These cities, once gateways of empire, are now silent. Their colossal statues, once above the water, now stand beneath it, gazing upward through currents and shadow. The harbours that saw the sails of 100 nations now hold only drifting fish. The sanctuaries where priests invoked gods now echo only with the hush of the sea. For us, they serve as reminders that even the mightiest civilizations are fragile before the shifting earth and the rising tide. That human achievement, however monumental, can vanish in a single lifetime, preserved only by chance. And that beneath the waters of our world lie countless other memories, waiting still in silence. Heracleion and Canopus now live again, not in stone rebuilt on land, but in maps, photographs, and careful preservation. Divers still descend into their quiet streets, brushing silt from inscriptions, lifting statues from the seabed, piecing together their stories. Yet part of their power lies in their continued submergence. To stand upon dry land and gaze across the waters of Abu Qir is to know that beneath the waves, entire cities rest, unseen, their voices muted, yet enduring. The sea guards them, the silence enfolds them, and through their rediscovery, we glimpse once more the fragile threshold between history and memory, between the living world and the drowned. And so, we leave Heracleion and Canopus in their watery tomb, listening to the quiet breath of the Mediterranean above them, not vanished but transformed, not lost but waiting. Their colossal guardians still stand in the darkness, their gaze eternal, their silence filled with memory. Chapter 6. Atlit-Yam. The Stone Circle. Beneath the sea, beneath the waters of Israel's northern coast, where the Mediterranean stretches in quiet blue toward the horizon, lies one of the most haunting windows into the human past. It is a place older than cities, older than kings, older than the written word itself. Atlit-Yam, a Neolithic village now drowned beneath the sea, resting in silence 6 to 12 meters below the waves. For nearly 9,000 years it has waited, preserved in salt and silt, until its discovery revealed a world of astonishing intimacy. A community's homes, its hearths, its wells, its graves, and at its center, a circle of standing stones, arranged with deliberation, whose meaning has not yet been lost entirely to the dark. The story of Atlit-Yam begins at the edge of the last ice age. As glaciers retreated, seas rose, swallowing coastlines across the world. Whole settlements were erased beneath advancing tides, and yet, in rare places, traces remained, sealed away. Off the coast of modern Atlit, near Haifa, divers stumbled upon such traces in the late 20th century. What they found was not a scattering of artifacts, but an entire village frozen in time, as though its people had just walked away. There are stone foundations of rectangular houses, laid out with care. Hearths where fires once burned still hold the ash of long extinguished flames. Grinding stones and sickle blades, fashioned from flint, rest where they were last used. In one corner, the remains of woven baskets, collapsed yet recognizable, speak of food once gathered and stored. And near the edge of the site, wells sunk deep into the earth still stand, perfectly preserved, their stones neatly stacked, their mouths still open to the sea. These wells, carved into limestone and dug more than 10 meters deep, hold traces of freshwater aquifers that once sustained the community. From these remains, we see not only the practical rhythms of survival, but also glimpses of intimacy. In one grave, the skeleton of a woman was found with her arms wrapped around that of a child, buried together in eternal embrace. In another, the bones of a man show signs of tuberculosis, the earliest known evidence of the disease in the world. The people of Atlit-Yam carried their burdens, both physical and spiritual, within a fragile, close-knit world. And then, at the heart of the site, there is the circle. 7 megaliths, each weighing up to 600 kilograms, rising from the seabed in deliberate alignment. Some are upright, others arranged horizontally. Their placement suggests more than utility. On the stones, shallow cup marks have been carved, their purpose uncertain, perhaps to hold offerings, perhaps to map the heavens above. Archaeologists suggest the circle may have been a ritual site, a place where the cycles of nature were measured and honored. When sunlight strikes the stones through the shifting water, one cannot help but feel the echo of ceremony, the reverence of those who raised them. What makes Atlit-Yam extraordinary is not only its age, but its sophistication. Dating to around 6900 to 6300 BCE, it belongs to the pre-pottery Neolithic era, a time when human societies were still learning the ways of settled life, shaping agriculture, domesticating animals, and weaving together the first fabrics of culture. Yet here we find evidence not only of farming but of seafaring. Fish hooks, net weights, and bones of marine species reveal that the people of Atlit-Yam ventured far from shore. They were not simply coastal gatherers, but mariners, their boats skimming the waters of the Mediterranean, linking them with communities beyond the horizon. This is a reminder that the sea, even in the Neolithic, was not a barrier but a bridge. From Cyprus to the Levant, from Anatolia to North Africa, trade and migration flowed across these waters. Atlit-Yam stood at the nexus of these movements, a village gazing outward as much as inward, sustaining itself from both land and sea. And yet, as with so many places we have already seen, Atlit-Yam's life ended in silence. The cause was most likely the great post-glacial floods that reshaped coastlines across the world. Between 8000 and 5000 BCE, melting ice sheets sent sea levels rising by tens of meters. Villages like Atlit-Yam, built upon low coastal plains, had little chance. Gradually the tides encroached. Wells turned brackish, fields were drowned. Perhaps its people moved inland, carrying their memories with them. Perhaps they watched helplessly as their stone circle was consumed, their homes taken by the advancing waves. The sea does not erase everything. It conceals, but it also preserves. And so, for 9 millennia, Atlit-Yam lay untouched beneath the waves. Unlike cities battered by storms or rivers, it remained still, blanketed in silt, sealed in time. When divers uncovered its stones in the 1980s and 90s, they found not fragments, but a complete settlement, one of the oldest known submerged villages on Earth. To look upon it today is to see not ruins in decay, but lives paused mid-breath, a hearth where a family once gathered, a well where water was drawn, a circle of stones where the seasons may have been marked. Each detail whispers of a world both alien and deeply familiar. A reminder that beneath the surface differences of time, the pulse of human life has always been much the same. And still, mysteries remain. Why was such effort expended to erect the megaliths? What rituals were performed here, on a shore that no longer exists? Were the cup marks carved into the stone's maps of stars, or symbols of prayers we can no longer read? Did the people of Atlit-Yam already sense the rising waters and build their circle as an appeal to forces beyond their control? We cannot yet say. What endures is the resonance of mystery itself, the recognition that in these stones lies knowledge half remembered, waiting still in silence. Atlit-Yam also speaks to the fragility of memory. How many other villages lie hidden beneath the sea? How many cultures were drowned, their stories never told? Across the world, from the Black Sea to the Indian Ocean, from the coasts of India to the shores of the Americas, archaeologists are only beginning to uncover drowned landscapes of astonishing scale. Atlit-Yam is not alone, but part of a greater tapestry, a record of the vast upheavals that ended the Ice Age and reshaped the world we live in today. When divers move among its stones, the water stills and silt drifts upward in slow spirals. Light filters from the surface, soft and wavering, casting shadows across the circle. Fish move quietly between the stones, their scales flashing like echoes of forgotten firelight. The village lies silent, yet the silence itself feels inhabited. It is not emptiness, but presence. The presence of lives once lived, of rituals once performed, of a people who built and dreamed, and who vanished into the rising tide. For us, Atlit-Yam is both discovery and mirror. It reveals how early humans adapted, how they built, how they honored the forces that shaped their world. But it also reminds us of how easily all can be lost. Civilization is not a straight ascent, but a fragile weaving of land and water, of stability and change. What is built can be drowned. What is remembered can be forgotten. And what is lost can sometimes be found again, waiting beneath the sea. So Atlit-Yam endures, beneath the waters of the Levant, a stone circle still standing in the silence of the deep. Not gone but transformed. Not forgotten but sleeping. Its well still open to the sea. Its stones still aligned with mysteries we cannot fully name. A village drowned, yet alive in memory, whispering of a time before time, when the first threads of our story were still being woven, and the sea, as always, was both giver and taker of worlds. Chapter 7. Phanagoria, Russia's forgotten capital, on the eastern edge of the Black Sea, where the waters of the Taman Peninsula mingle with the Caspian steppe winds, lies a place once alive with the pulse of trade, myth, and empire. Today it is quiet, much of it drowned, its stones scattered beneath the tide. Phanagoria, once the largest Greek colony on the shores of the Black Sea, a city of wealth and philosophy, of temples and necropolies, now survives half in memory, half in ruin, its voice softened by the earth and the sea that claimed it. Founded in the 6th century BCE by colonists from Teos, an Ionian city fleeing the Persian advance, Phanagoria was conceived as both refuge and frontier. Here, at the mouth of the Hypanis River, the Greeks established not only a settlement, but a capital, a bridge between the Mediterranean world and the vast unknown of the steppe. It grew quickly, spreading across 2 hills and down toward the water's edge, where harbors welcomed ships from Athens, from Sinope, from the coast of Asia Minor. The city's very position made it a meeting place of worlds. To the south lay the restless waters of the Black Sea, a highway of commerce and migration. To the north stretched the endless expanse of Scythian grasslands, where mounted nomads roamed, carrying traditions older than writing. Between them, Phanagoria stood as intermediary, translating the language of trade into silver coinage, amphorae of wine, and painted pottery. It was here that the Greek imagination met the raw breadth of Eurasia. Walking its submerged streets today, one would find the foundations of fortification walls, once standing as massive stone barriers against both enemies and the sea itself. Divers have uncovered lengths of masonry disappearing into the depths, sections of bastion and gate long collapsed, their blocks strewn upon the seabed. In shallow waters, amphorae lie half buried, their clay bodies still carrying the faint markings of their makers. Some still hold residues of oil or wine, sealed in darkness for 2,000 years. But Phanagoria was not only a marketplace, it was also a place of reverence, a sacred city. Beneath its soil lies one of the largest necropolies of the ancient Greek world. Tombs carved into the earth stretch for kilometers, their contents speaking to a culture at once Greek and yet transformed by its frontier setting. Inside some of these graves, gold ornaments glint against dark soil. Diadems, earrings, and delicate wreaths wrought into shapes of leaves and flowers. Others hold painted sarcophagi, their pigments still visible after millennia, depicting warriors, banquets, and mythic scenes. One tomb, found not far from the shoreline, contained the remains of a noblewoman. Around her neck lay strings of pearls. At her feet, a vessel of perfume, still sealed, carried the faint aroma of a long-vanished world. In her presence, one feels the intimacy of lives once lived, the quiet dignity of a civilization now resting in silence. Phanagoria was not untouched by the myths that shaped the ancient mind. According to legend, it was here that Medea fled after murdering her children in Corinth, seeking refuge on the far edges of the known world. It was here too that her husband Jason was said to have found his exile. Whether these tales are echoes of real migrations or symbolic truths carried by the Greeks themselves, they entwined Phanagoria with the fabric of story, binding its stones to the wider tapestry of myth. The city rose to prominence under the Bosporan kingdom, becoming its capital and cultural heart. Philosophers wrote here, inscriptions carved laws into stone, and temples rose in honor of the gods. In its prime, Phanagoria was a city of tens of thousands, rivaling the great polis of the Aegean in influence, though not in fame. Its people straddled two worlds, Greek settlers and local tribes, mingling languages, traditions, and beliefs, and yet, like so many cities we have traced upon the shifting frontier between land and water, Phanagoria's story was destined for silence. Earthquakes shook its foundations, shattering walls and temples. Fires followed, their charred remains still found in collapsed timbers and blackened soil. And as centuries passed, the shoreline itself changed. The Black Sea, restless and consuming, crept inward. Portions of the city sank beneath brackish waters, their stones swallowed by the advancing tide. Today, more than a third of Phanagoria lies underwater. Divers moving across the seabed find colonnades fallen in rows, fragments of marble inscriptions still legible through the distortion of light. Coins shimmer faintly in the sand, stamped with the visages of kings now long forgotten. Here and there, anchors lie among the stones, abandoned by sailors who once moored at its harbour. The silence of this submerged quarter is profound. Fish swim through collapsed archways. Seaweed drapes across broken columns. Sunlight flickers down in wavering patterns, animating what remains with a strange, living glow. What was once the noise of merchants and philosophers, of oars striking water and priests chanting before altars, is now only the hush of currents moving across stones. Even on land, much of Phanagoria is still buried. Excavations have uncovered temples, houses, and mosaics, but the greater part remains hidden beneath soil and sea, awaiting careful revelation. And so the city breathes in half-light, part unearthed, part submerged, part still dreaming. Its story is not only about destruction, it is also about continuity. Though the earthquakes and waters forced its people to abandon parts of their city, life endured. In the centuries that followed, Phanagoria remained inhabited, reshaped again and again until its final decline in the early medieval period. Its coins continued to circulate, its myths continued to be told, its necropolis continued to receive the dead. Civilization does not end in a single moment, but drifts into silence, stone by stone, word by word, standing at the edge of its ruins today. One can feel both the weight of what has been lost and the presence of what still endures. The sea has not destroyed Phanagoria. It has simply hidden it, preserved it in shadow. Its walls and tombs, its amphorae and altars, remain, not erased, but waiting. And perhaps that is the deeper lesson of places like this. The earth remembers, the sea remembers. Beneath every tide and every layer of soil, fragments of our story still sleep. Phanagoria, half above and half below, is a reminder that the boundaries between past and present, between land and water, are never fixed. They shift, they dissolve, they reappear. What once was a capital is now a seabed. What once was bustling with voices is now quiet with currents. And yet, the city is still here, beneath the Black Sea's restless surface, amid the ruins of fortifications and necropolis. Phanagoria continues its long vigil. Stones still rise from the seabed. Gold still gleams in its tombs. In silence, in darkness, the forgotten capital still speaks, not in words, but in presence. Chapter 8. Port Royal. The sunken city of Sinon. The southern edge of Jamaica, where the Caribbean Sea stretches wide and glimmering, lies a drowned reminder of sudden destruction and human excess. Port Royal, once called the wickedest city on earth, today rests partly beneath the waves, its streets collapsed, its taverns overturned, its people entombed in the sand of the harbour floor. Unlike the older, half-mythical cities whose ruins sleep under centuries of tides, Port Royal is young. It fell not thousands of years ago, but only in 1692, in an age already well documented by European scribes and colonial maps. Its death was witnessed, recorded, and mourned in vivid detail. And yet, even with its proximity to modern memory, its ruin carries the same silence, the same haunting reminder as those more ancient cities of stone. Port Royal began as a simple outpost. The Spanish first occupied the sandy spit known as the Palisadoes, a narrow strip of land enclosing Jamaica's Kingston Harbour. But when the English seized Jamaica in 1655, the harbour took on a new life. Its waters were deep enough to host entire fleets, and its location made it an ideal anchor point for ships crossing the Caribbean. Soon, the English fortified it, building walls, batteries, and watchtowers. The town grew with astonishing speed, expanding from a handful of structures into a thriving seaport in a matter of decades. By the late 17th century, Port Royal had become the beating heart of England's Caribbean empire. Ships from London, Bristol, and Amsterdam arrived laden with manufactured goods and sailed away again filled with sugar, rum, and enslaved lives. Merchants made fortunes. Fortunes bought taverns, mansions, and ornaments of silver and gold. But it was not only trade that gave the city its character. The governor of Jamaica, unable to defend the island with soldiers alone, granted licenses to privateers. Men like Henry Morgan and Christopher Mings turned Port Royal into a nest of corsairs. From here, fleets sailed to raid Spanish strongholds, Portobelo, Maracaibo, even Panama itself, returning with treasure to be divided in its streets. And so Port Royal grew rich, and with its wealth came notoriety. Along its narrow lanes stood more than 100 taverns, where rum and ale flowed without end. Brothels lined the alleys, their doors open at all hours. Duels were fought in the squares. Gambling tables filled entire houses. Contemporary preachers warned that the city was a new Babylon, a place where sin had been given a kingdom of its own. To outsiders, it was both fascinating and horrifying. A city where sailors and pirates walked armed with cutlasses, where merchants mingled with outlaws, and where the wealth of empires changed hands across tavern tables. It was this very vibrancy that made its fall so sudden, so devastating. On the morning of June 7th, 1692, life moved as it always did. The harbour glittered under the tropical sun. Merchants opened their stalls. Tavern doors creaked wide. Priests prepared their sermons. Then, just before noon, the earth shook. Witnesses recalled the ground convulsing with a sound like thunder. Buildings swayed, then collapsed. Walls split open. Streets opened into fissures, swallowing people whole. In the harbour, ships tore from their moorings as waves rose. A great tsunami surged across the Palisadoes, breaking upon the city, dragging houses, churches, and bodies into the sea. Entire blocks slid from the sandy spit into the water, crumbling as they fell. In the span of 2 minutes, 2/3 of Port Royal was destroyed. More than 2,000 people were dead, with hundreds more drowning in the days that followed as the sea continued to claim the wreckage. Survivors told of taverns sinking with their patrons still inside, of church bells ringing as they disappeared beneath the waves. In one account, a man was seen drinking at a bar when the floor gave way beneath him. The sea closed over, and both man and tavern were gone. The earthquake itself was powerful, but it was the ground on which Port Royal stood that betrayed it. Built on sand and clay, the city had been unstable from the beginning. When the tremors struck, the earth liquefied, a phenomenon known as liquefaction, and the very ground dissolved beneath the weight of its buildings. Streets became quicksand. Stone houses toppled like toys. What had taken decades to build collapsed in moments. Today, much of that city remains underwater, preserved in remarkable detail by the silt and salt of Kingston Harbour. Archaeologists diving among the ruins have found streets still intact, lined with brick walls and wooden beams, frozen in the moment of collapse. Clay pipes lie beside broken bottles of rum. Pewter plates, iron nails, even leather shoes rest on the seabed, undisturbed since that day. In some cases, entire rooms have been found. A cupboard, with dishes still stacked inside, a bed frame lying where it once stood. It is as if the city was not destroyed, but simply submerged, locked in place by the harbour's embrace. And in these ruins, there is an eerie intimacy. Unlike the grand ruins of Egypt or Greece, where colonnades and temples speak of civilizations long faded, Port Royal preserves the fragments of daily life. A pair of spectacles, their frames bent, a child's toy, a set of scales used by a merchant to weigh coins. These objects do not speak of myth, but of human immediacy, lives interrupted in the act of living. Port Royal's destruction was not total. In the years after 1692, survivors rebuilt on what remained of the spit. Though earthquakes, fires, and hurricanes would batter the settlement again and again, Kingston, across the harbour, gradually eclipsed it, taking its place as Jamaica's capital of trade. But the memory of Port Royal never faded. For those who lived through its fall, it was a sign of divine judgment. Preachers called it punishment for sin, a modern Sodom cast into the sea. For later generations, it became a cautionary tale of human hubris, of a city built too hastily, too greedily, upon ground too fragile to bear its weight. And yet, beneath the waves, the city remains. Divers moving carefully through its ruins see not only destruction but preservation. Wooden beams protected by the anaerobic silt still retain their form after 3 centuries. Clay tiles and brick walls stand upright, their mortar still binding them. Streets appear suddenly out of the murk, vanishing again into the darkness. It is a city both dead and alive, both present and absent. As you drift in thought toward its submerged lanes, imagine the silence of its underwater avenues. Sunlight filters down through the shifting water, painting walls with patterns of gold and shadow. Schools of fish glide past what was once a market square. A fragment of pottery, etched by a craftsman centuries ago, lies untouched at the base of a broken column. The sea has taken the noise, the violence, the clamour of taverns and brothels. What remains is stillness. Unlike the legendary cities swallowed by myth and time, Port Royal reminds us that catastrophe is not only ancient. It is not confined to stories of antediluvian floods or forgotten empires. It can come swiftly in the light of recorded history, sweeping away what seems permanent in the span of a few breaths. Its ruins are a mirror, reflecting not only the fragility of cities, but of the lives within them. And so Port Royal rests, not erased, but hidden. Half above, in the stories passed down through 3 centuries, and half below, in the quiet dark of Kingston Harbour. Its drowned streets whisper of laughter that turned to silence, of gold that slipped beneath the sea, of human ambition forever stilled. And if you listen carefully, you can still hear it. The faint echo of bells, the rush of waves, the memory of a city undone. Chapter 9. Baiae. Rome's submerged playground beneath the still waters of the Bay of Naples, where sunlight ripples across the surface and disappears into shifting blue, lies the drowned ghost of a city once called the playground of emperors. Baiae, a name spoken in whispers by poets of the past, celebrated for its pleasures, feared for its excess, and now remembered in silence beneath the sea. Baiae was not a city of industry, nor a capital of governance. It was a retreat, a place where Rome's elite escaped the weight of empire to indulge in its rewards. Along its hillsides and curving coastline, villas spread like white marble blossoms. Terraces overlooked the bay, colonnades framed the horizon, and gardens spilled down toward the shore. It was a place of luxury built upon a foundation both natural and perilous. The volcanic soil of the Phlegraean fields, a land alive with unseen fire. The allure of Baiae was not only its setting, but its waters. Here, hot springs welled from the earth, carrying with them a mineral heat that soothed the body and promised health. The Romans, masters of aqueduct and bath, shaped these gifts into sprawling thermal complexes. Vast pools, some under open sky, others enclosed in domes of stone, invited visitors to linger for hours. Steam rose through the air, curling around marble statues of gods. Beneath vaulted ceilings, conversations echoed between senators, generals, and poets. To soak in Baiae was to step into a realm of both indulgence and reverence, where nature and architecture fused into one experience of power and ease. But Baiae was not only for healing. It became a stage for the theatre of Roman wealth. Along its promenades, adorned with mosaics and fountains, feasts unfolded that lasted from dusk until dawn. Tables groaned beneath silver platters of roasted meats, amphorae of wine poured without measure, and music filled the air from lyres and flutes. Accounts from antiquity describe scenes where laughter and intrigue mingled, where alliances were forged in whispered confidences, and where pleasure reigned as its own kind of empire. The emperors themselves came here, seeking not governance, but escape. Julius Caesar once stayed at Baiae, as did Augustus, who found its air restorative. Nero, ever the dramatist, ordered lavish constructions along its shores, including an artificial lake for his private performances. Later, Hadrian is said to have spent his final days here, weakened by illness, gazing out across the bay as the empire he had shaped stretched far beyond the horizon. Yet Baiae was more than a resort. In its indulgence, it became a mirror to the fragility of human restraint. Roman writers spoke of its decadence with both awe and condemnation. It was called a place where old men acted like boys and boys like gods. It was said that no vice was absent there, that its pleasures corrupted even the sternest of characters. To walk through Baiae was to witness the thin line between leisure and ruin, a truth that would outlive the empire itself. And beneath this theatre of pleasure, the earth stirred. The Phlegraean fields are among the most volatile volcanic zones in the world, a caldera that breathes heat and pressure from beneath the crust. Ancient Romans felt this presence, naming the landscape after the flames they believed smouldered below. Temples were raised to gods of the underworld, Pluto, Vulcan, Mercury, for it was clear that this was a land where boundaries between realms were fragile. To bathe in Baiae was not only to sink into mineral waters, but to descend symbolically toward the hidden fires beneath. Over centuries, the ground shifted. Some areas of Baiae rose, others sank. Slowly, imperceptibly, parts of the city slipped beneath the waters of the bay. Villas that once looked out across the sea became its floor. Mosaic courtyards were swallowed by the tide. The laughter of feasts gave way to the silence of waves. And when Rome itself fractured, when its empire dimmed under the weight of invasions and time, Baiae too was left to decline. The marble cracked, the gardens withered, and the waters, restless and patient, claimed what remained. Today, divers who descend into the submerged ruins encounter a city preserved in fragments, dreamlike in its quiet. Columns rise from the seabed, leaning at angles that suggest both grace and collapse. Mosaic floors, once walked upon by emperors and their companions, lie under a veil of sand and seagrass. Statues, some intact, others broken, rest among the ruins, their features blurred by centuries of salt and tide. In places, walls still stand, marking the outlines of villas that once rang with voices. The effect is haunting. Swimming through Baiae is to drift through the shadow of Rome's pleasures, to witness the echo of an age where indulgence reigns supreme. The sea, in its way, has become curator and guardian. By covering the ruins, it has preserved them from the scavenging of later centuries, keeping in silence what might otherwise have been lost. There is a paradox here, one felt deeply by those who study the ruins. Baiae was a place built upon impermanence, a retreat for leisure, a stage for fleeting pleasure. Yet its stones, submerged and quiet, have endured beyond the empire that once filled them with life. The laughter of Rome has faded, but the mosaic floors remain. The power of emperors has dissolved into history, but their baths still rest beneath the tide. In the mythology of Rome, the boundary between land and sea, between the world of the living and the realm of the gods, was always thin. Neptune's domain was one of both bounty and danger. The drowned remains of Baiae seem to embody this boundary, resting half in memory, half in silence, reminding us of the frailty of all empires. As you imagine drifting through its sunken streets, the mind slows. Shafts of light descend through the water, illuminating fragments of marble, fading into darkness. Fish move through colonnades once filled with senators and poets. The sea has taken the music, the feasts, the decadence, leaving only stillness. And in that stillness, something deeper remains. Not merely the ruins of a resort, but the shadow of an empire learning the inevitability of its own erosion. Baiae rests now as both warning and wonder, a reminder that power, no matter how vast, cannot hold back the earth, nor the sea, nor time. A place where pleasure once reigned, now hushed beneath the waters, whispering of the fragility of human ambition and of the silence that eventually claims all things. Chapter 10. Kakova and the Lycian coast along the southern shores of Turkey, where the mountains descend toward the Mediterranean in sharp ridges of stone, lies a coast unlike any other. Here, on the waters near the island of Kakova, the sea conceals an ancient story. The surface is calm, a mirrored sheet of blue, but just beneath it rests a city undone by both earth and water. Walls that once framed homes now fade into shadow. Staircases carved in stone descend not into courtyards, but into silence. Harbours where ships once anchored lie broken and half forgotten. This is the sunken city of Kekova, a place where history and myth intertwine. The Lycian coast was always a meeting point of worlds. To the west lay the Aegean, to the east the Levant, and to the south, across vast waters, the trading routes of Egypt and beyond. The Lycians themselves were a seafaring people, known in ancient inscriptions as fierce navigators and skilled builders. Their cities clung to the rocky slopes above the shoreline, terraced in stone, their tombs carved directly into cliffs. Their world was maritime in essence, defined by water, shaped by it, and ultimately claimed by it. Kekova's drowned ruins speak of this maritime life. The outlines of houses can still be traced, foundations resting beneath shifting tides. Some walls rise above the waterline, their bases submerged, their upper stones weathered by centuries of salt and wind. Staircases appear abruptly, their steps leading downward into the blue, as though inviting a descent into memory itself. Along the shoreline, one can still glimpse the broken mouths of ancient harbours, where fleets once sheltered, where cargo was loaded and voices echoed. Now they open only into quiet, their stone piers softened by the sea. The cause of Kekova's submersion lies in the restless power of the earth beneath it. The Anatolian plate is a landscape of fault lines, where tremors have shaped cities for thousands of years. Earthquakes, sudden and violent, shook these coasts, dropping entire stretches of land into the sea. Over centuries, the rising level of the Mediterranean compounded the loss, slowly swallowing what remained. The result is a half-world, a place where ruins straddle the boundary between air and water, preserved in fragments by both. For centuries, sailors passing along this coast would have seen the stones of Kekova glimmering beneath the surface. To them, it must have seemed a vision suspended between the real and the unreal, a city neither wholly gone nor truly present. Myths of sunken lands are not confined to the Atlantic or the North. Along the Lycian coast too, the idea of a drowned world found expression, mingling memory with reverence. The Lycians themselves remain a people of mystery. Their inscriptions, written in a script partly their own and partly borrowed from Greek, speak of rulers and dynasties, but also of autonomy. Unlike many ancient nations, they were not easily subdued. Even as empires pressed upon them, the Persians, the Greeks, the Romans, the Lycians retained a confederation of cities, a unique system of governance that allowed them to preserve identity in the face of power. Kekova, though smaller than cities like Xanthos or Patara, shared in this maritime autonomy, its harbour a point of connection to the wider world. It is striking that much of what survives of Lycian culture is tied to stone. Their tombs, cut high into cliff faces, still watch the sea. Their sarcophagi, with their distinctive curved lids, stand scattered along the shoreline, some still visible near Kekova itself, half sunken, their forms emerging from water like reminders of both mortality and endurance. These funerary monuments suggest a people deeply aware of continuity between life and death, between land and sea, between permanence and loss. The sunken city is an extension of this vision, a necropolis of memory created not by design, but by cataclysm. Today, the waters above Kekova are clear. In summer sunlight, the ruins appear beneath the surface like faint drawings, mosaics sketched by time. From above, one sees the outlines of chambers, walls and jetties, distorted by the rhythm of the waves. It is as if the city continues to breathe, the sea itself a slow inhalation and exhalation across its stones. Divers speak of a profound stillness here, of drifting through a place where silence itself feels ancient, where every ripple seems to carry voices long extinguished. There are legends, too, of treasures left behind, of goods sealed away when the earth gave way. Yet unlike other sunken sites, Kekova was not buried in sudden oblivion like Pompeii or Port Royal. It was eroded into the sea, a gradual undoing, giving its people time to flee, to resettle, to carry with them what they could. What was left became not so much a grave, but a hushed reminder of impermanence. The surrounding coast still carries the memory. In villages along the shore, fragments of ancient stone are built into modern walls. Farmers and fishermen walk paths that cross foundations older than empires. Children swim in bays where harbours once opened to fleets. Here, the boundary between past and present is thin, as if time itself is layered like the terraces of Lycian hillsides. The island of Kekova, uninhabited now, holds a silence of its own. Its rocky slopes descend steeply into the sea, broken by inlets where small boats anchor. For visitors drifting close, the water reveals sudden shapes below, the curve of an arch, the line of a wall, the impression of a doorway. In the shifting light, the city seems to appear and disappear, neither entirely present nor entirely gone. Archaeologists tread carefully here. To excavate beneath the water would risk disturbing what the sea has preserved. Instead, Kekova remains largely untouched, a protected zone where history is allowed to rest. Its story is told not through removal, but through presence, through the shimmering vision of stone beneath water, through the awareness that beneath the calm surface lies a society's memory. There is a haunting beauty in this restraint. The ruins are not reconstructed, not lifted back into light, but left in their place of submersion. To witness Kekova is to engage not with what has been recovered, but with what has been surrendered. It is an invitation to reflect, not on conquest or glory, but on the quiet endurance of ruins and the inevitability of change. The Lycian coast is rich with such reminders. Not far from Kekova, the ancient city of Myra lies inland, its rock-cut tombs rising in silent tiers. To the west, Patara opens onto the sea with its vast theatre and lighthouse, once a beacon for ships across the Mediterranean. Together, these cities weave a story of a people who balance between mountains and sea, between autonomy and empire, between permanence and loss. Kekova, in its submersion, is perhaps the purest expression of this balance. A city half claimed by the waves, half preserved in stone. As the sun lowers over the Mediterranean, light falls in long bands across the surface of the water. The submerged city glows faintly, its outlines softened by shadow. Waves move gently against the shore, their sound carrying the rhythm of time itself. To linger here is to feel the meeting of worlds, the solidity of stone, the fluidity of water, the fragility of human endeavor, and the immensity of forces beyond control. Kekova remains, half in myth, half in stone. A city undone by earthquakes, claimed by the sea, preserved in silence. It speaks not of conquest or collapse, but of continuity, of how memory lingers, how ruins endure, how even in loss, a kind of presence persists. And as with all the sunken places of the world, it asks us to listen, to slow, to drift with it into the spaces where time and silence converge. Chapter 11. Beneath the Black Waters, the Bosporus Mysteries. There are places in the world where water itself seems to carry memory. The Bosporus, that narrow strait dividing Europe and Asia, is such a place. Today, it is one of the busiest waterways on Earth, its surface crossed by cargo ships and ferries, the outlines of Istanbul rising on either shore. Yet beneath its dark currents lies a mystery far older than cities, older than empires, older even than writing. It is here, in this narrow channel, that some believe one of the greatest cataclysms in human prehistory unfolded. To understand the story, we must turn not to the present, but to a time long before recorded history. The world was still adjusting to the end of the last ice age. Vast sheets of glacial ice had melted, pouring water into the oceans, raising sea levels worldwide. Shorelines shifted, islands disappeared, entire landscapes were transformed. But it was here, near the Black Sea, that a particularly dramatic transformation may have taken place. Archaeologists and geologists have long debated what happened. Some suggest that the Black Sea, now a vast inland sea connected to the Mediterranean by the Bosporus and the Dardanelles, was once something very different, a freshwater lake, cut off from the greater oceans, its level far below that of the Mediterranean. Around 7,600 years ago, they propose, the rising waters of the Mediterranean suddenly broke through the narrow land bridge at the Bosporus. The flood that followed would have been no gradual seepage, but a catastrophic surge, pouring billions of gallons of salt water into the lower basin each day. To imagine this event is to enter a landscape of upheaval. Where today the Bosporus flows calmly, there may once have been a thunderous torrent, a waterfall of unimaginable scale. The sea would have rushed in with the force of creation and destruction combined, raising the level of the Black Sea by hundreds of feet, drowning valleys, forests, and perhaps whole communities in the span of a generation. To those who lived along its shores, the world would have seemed to end. It is here that myth and geology intersect. Across cultures, from Mesopotamia to the Levant, from Greece to the far north, there are stories of floods. Stories of gods who grew angry and swept away humankind. Stories of lone survivors, families who built boats, who gathered animals, who drifted until the waters subsided. The biblical account of Noah is only one of many. The Epic of Gilgamesh tells of Utnapishtim, warned of a great deluge by the god Ea. In Greek tradition, Deucalion and Pyrrha survive a flood sent by Zeus to cleanse a corrupt age. These myths are not identical, but their echoes are undeniable. Many wonder whether they are distant cultural memories of a real prehistoric event. And if so, was the flooding of the Black Sea the source? The evidence is compelling, though not without dispute. Marine geologists Robert Ballard and William Ryan, in their explorations of the Black Sea floor, found signs that its shoreline once lay far below the present level. Sediment cores reveal sudden shifts from freshwater organisms to saltwater species, a transition abrupt enough to suggest catastrophe, not slow change. Beneath layers of silt, there are traces of drowned coastlines, river valleys now deep underwater, ancient beaches far from today's shore. Ballard even discovered the remains of wooden structures, the timbers of what may have been a Neolithic settlement, preserved in the oxygen-poor depths. If true, this would mean that entire human communities, villages, farms, perhaps small towns, were erased by the onrush of the sea. People who had lived for generations on fertile plains suddenly found their world dissolving beneath them. Fields were swallowed, homes abandoned, burial grounds lost to the waters. What could not be carried was left behind, sealed away in the dark. One must imagine what it was like to witness such an event. A family tending crops near the shoreline might have seen the waters rise week by week, then day by day until their fields were submerged. Forests where they once hunted deer would vanish into waves. The sound of the flood itself, the roar of water pouring through the Bosporus, might have been heard for miles. It would not have been an instant obliteration, like an earthquake or volcanic eruption, but a creeping devastation, relentless and inescapable. Such a transformation would etch itself into memory, and memory, carried forward in story, could evolve into myth. Yet the debate continues. Not all agree that the flooding was sudden. Some argue it was slower, stretching over centuries, allowing gradual adaptation rather than instant cataclysm. Others suggest the Black Sea was never entirely freshwater to begin with, but always brackish, always connected in some form to the greater seas. In this uncertainty, the mystery remains. Science offers evidence but not certainty, and it is within that space of unknowing that mythology takes root. What we do know is that the Bosporus has always been a threshold. It is a liminal space, a meeting of waters, a line between worlds. In later millennia, it would divide continents and empires, but even in prehistory, it was the gateway between two realities: the smaller, enclosed world of the Black Sea and the vast, endless horizon of the Mediterranean. When the barrier broke, that threshold was crossed, and everything changed. The Black Sea today still bears the traces of this transformation. Its lower depths are anoxic, deprived of oxygen, preserving organic remains with unusual clarity. Shipwrecks thousands of years old rest on its floor, their timbers intact, their cargo still sealed. Beneath them may lie older secrets still. Villages drowned, altars abandoned, stones carved by forgotten hands. If the flood truly happened, then somewhere in those silent depths lie the remains of the people who endured it, or who did not. For those who study the past, the question is not merely geological, but human. How did those early societies respond? Did they flee north, carrying their legends with them? Did they migrate into Anatolia, into Mesopotamia, into the Balkans, spreading not only their knowledge but their story of a flood sent by powers greater than themselves? Could the myth of Noah, preserved in scripture thousands of years later, be a distant echo of their memory? To ponder these questions is to enter the stillness of the Black Sea itself. Its waters are dark, often described as brooding, their surface concealing a vast reservoir of silence. Unlike the bright clarity of the Mediterranean, the Black Sea holds its secrets close, its depths hidden, its stories muted. Yet within that silence, there is resonance. The possibility that what lies beneath is not only stone and silt, but the memory of a turning point in human experience. Standing on the shores of the Bosporus today, it is difficult to imagine the scale of such a transformation. The city of Istanbul rises on both sides, a testament to millennia of human settlement at this crossroads of land and sea. Ferries pass, gulls circle, the waters seem eternal. But if we allow our imagination to drift backward, beyond the reach of empires, beyond even the first writing of myths, we arrive at a moment of elemental change when the boundary between sea and land dissolved, and memory itself was reshaped. Perhaps this is why the story of the flood endures across so many cultures. It is not only about destruction, but about survival. It is about the fragility of human life before forces vast and ungovernable, and about the resilience of memory in the face of loss. The Bosporus, quiet now, may once have been the stage for one of those moments when the human story was rewritten by the earth itself. The waters are still there, flowing ceaselessly between two seas. Beneath them, perhaps, lie villages that will never again see the sun. Above them, myths linger, their words echoing across thousands of years. The truth of what happened remains submerged, half in geology, half in legend. And so the Bosporus continues to hold its mystery, a threshold, a silence, a memory written not in books or tablets, but in the depths of the sea. Chapter 12. The Pillars of Mahabalipuram on the southeastern coast of India, where the Bay of Bengal unfurls its restless tides against stone. There stands a place where myth and memory flow together like the sea itself. This is Mahabalipuram, or Mamalapuram, as it is also known, a landscape of rock-cut temples, towering shrines, and weathered carvings that speak of an age when kings sought to shape divinity into stone. For centuries, travelers to this coast whispered of something more, a legend of 7 pagodas, of which only one remained visible, while 6 others had been claimed by the sea. Sailors told of spires glimpsed beneath the waves, of stone walls rising from the ocean floor, of whole complexes that shimmered just out of reach. For many, these were stories no more solid than the spray of the surf, fragments of folklore carried by the wind. But in 2004, the sea itself revealed its memory. When a devastating tsunami struck the Indian Ocean, waves tore back the waters along the Tamil Nadu coast. In that fleeting moment, the shoreline was stripped bare, and there, beneath the receding tide, the outlines of ancient structures appeared. Walls, pillars, and sculpted stones emerged from their shroud of sand, as if the ocean had drawn aside a veil. For the first time, the legend of the 7 pagodas seemed to take on tangible form. Mahabalipuram had always been a sacred stage. During the Pallava dynasty, beginning in the 7th century, artisans carved shrines directly into granite outcrops. The shore temple, the most famous of them all, still stands watch on the edge of the sea, its twin towers weathered by salt and storm. Around it lie cave sanctuaries, monolithic chariots hewn from single stones, and bas-reliefs so vast they unfold like epics in stone. The most celebrated of these, known as the Descent of the Ganges or Arjuna's Penance, depicts gods, sages, and celestial beings gathered around a torrent of descending water, a frozen hymn to cosmic forces. Yet the Pallava monuments, remarkable as they are, may not be the whole story. The tales of the 7 pagodas suggest that the shore temple was once one among many, part of a grand arrangement of sanctuaries along the coast. Medieval travelers repeated the legend, weaving it into maps and maritime lore. Marco Polo is said to have carried news of the 7 pagodas to distant Europe, where they entered the imagination of men who would never see the Indian Ocean. The 2004 tsunami offered a rare glimpse behind the curtain. Archaeologists, once the seas had calmed, surveyed the exposed ruins. They found large stone blocks, carved lions, and remnants of walls aligned with deliberate precision. Underwater exploration confirmed the presence of submerged structures lying just offshore, some appearing to be man-made, their patterns distinct from natural rock formations. One discovery was especially evocative: a row of stone lions, their forms half buried, gazing eternally into the deep. Were these the remnants of the lost pagodas, or were they older still, traces of civilizations predating even the Pallavas? Here the questions multiply. The coast of Tamil Nadu has been a crossroads of maritime trade for millennia. Ports here connected India with Rome, with Southeast Asia, with kingdoms across the Indian Ocean. To build temples at the water's edge was not only an act of devotion but also of power, signaling to arriving ships that this was a land of kings favored by the gods. If 6 temples were truly lost, then their disappearance would have marked more than a religious loss. It would have been the silencing of a sacred harbor. The sea is both preserver and destroyer. It erases, yet it also guards. Beneath the waves, The ruins of Mahabalipuram sleep in relative stillness, protected by silt and salt. Legends suggest that the ocean's claim was sudden, perhaps the result of a great storm or an ancient tsunami long before that of 2004. Indian folklore often speaks of the sea as a living force, one that hungers for offerings and takes what is not freely given. To the people who watch their temples swallowed, it may not have been erosion or tectonics they saw, but the will of divine beings. Comparative mythology offers an intriguing echo. Across cultures, coastal temples and cities are remembered as having been consumed by the ocean. The Atlantean myth in Greece, the sunken city of Dwarka further up India's western coast, the drowned lands of Lyonesse in Celtic lore, all tell of places where human grandeur met the sea's dominion. Mahabalipuram fits within this tapestry, a local expression of a universal memory, that the ocean, for all its beauty, is a power that cannot be mastered. Even today, standing before the shore temple, one feels the fragility of permanence. Waves crash against its base, winds scour its stone, and storms threaten its foundation. It is remarkable that the temple has endured at all, given its vulnerable perch. The knowledge that other temples, once its companions, now lie hidden beneath the surface, only deepens the sense of impermanence. The temple does not merely mark devotion, it embodies survival. The tsunami of 2004 was itself a reminder of how quickly the sea can reclaim. For a few brief hours, the waters receded so far that people walked upon seabeds long unseen. Families and fishermen found themselves in landscapes both familiar and alien. The bones of walls jutting through sand, the outlines of stairs leading nowhere. When the tide surged back, it closed its hand once more, concealing what it had revealed. Only in memory, photographs, and hurried surveys did the vision endure. Archaeologists continue to study the site, employing sonar mapping and diving expeditions to trace the outlines of what lies beneath. Each discovery is incremental, a block here, a pillar there, but together they suggest a pattern of deliberate construction, not random stonefall. Some structures may date back over 1,000 years. Others may hint at habitation older still, reaching into the shadows of India's prehistoric past. In such depths, it is hard to draw firm lines between what is temple and what is myth, what is fact and what is story. Yet perhaps that is the essence of Mahabalipuram, a place where the two converge, where memory is kept alive through both stone and tale. For the people who live here, the legend of the 7 pagodas is more than archaeology. It is identity, inheritance, a way of speaking about the sea that has both given and taken. Fishermen still tell of seeing shapes beneath the waves on clear days. Elders speak of the gods' temples lying just beyond reach, guarded by the waters. To them, the 2004 revelations were not surprises, but confirmations of what had always been known in the heart. The shore temple, then, becomes more than a monument of the palavas. It is a survivor, a sentinel, the last visible member of a vanished family. Its twin towers rise not only for the gods, but for its lost companions, a solitary reminder that 6 others may rest beneath the tide. To walk among its stones is to walk at the boundary of presence and absence, of memory and oblivion. As the sun sets over the Bay of Bengal, the temple glows in fading light, and the sea gathers its darkness. The waves rise and fall, concealing what lies beneath. The ocean keeps its secrets, but not without whispering. Through myth, through sudden revelation, through fleeting glimpses in storm and tide, it allows us to sense that something more rests beneath the surface. The story of Mahabalipuram is not finished. Archaeology may yet uncover more. Legends may yet be retold, but for now, the balance remains. 1 temple standing, 6 hidden, a dialogue between stone and sea that has endured for centuries. And so we leave the shore temple, its silhouette framed by water and sky, knowing that beneath the horizon lie the pillars of others, unseen but not forgotten. Chapter 13. The vanished shores of Sri Lanka far to the south of India, where the Indian Ocean unfurls into endless blue. The island of Sri Lanka rises from the waters like a jewel set into the crown of the sea. Its coastlines are fringed with palms, its interior marked by mountains that catch the clouds, and its shores shaped by tides that have carried merchants, pilgrims, and kings for thousands of years. Yet within its cultural memory, preserved in oral traditions and myth, there lingers a far older story, a memory of land that once stretched far beyond the present shores. In Tamil lore, this forgotten land is called Kumari Kandam, a vast southern continent, said to have been swallowed by the sea in ages long past. According to the traditions, Kumari Kandam was not merely a stretch of territory, but the cradle of civilization, home to dynasties, poets, and temples of extraordinary grandeur. Its destruction, sudden and immense, scattered its survivors and erased from the earth a chapter of human history so vast that only myth could preserve its outline. To stand at the southern tip of Sri Lanka, at Doggerland or at Kanyakumari just across the strait in India, is to look out upon waters that seem to hold a secret. The horizon is unbroken, but in the imagination of those who inherit these stories, it is haunted by a vanished shore. Divers in more recent decades have added to this mystery, reporting possible structures beneath the waves, walls, stone platforms, and geometric forms that suggest human hand rather than natural chance. The archaeology is tentative, the evidence often debated, but the resonance with Tamil traditions is undeniable. The sea between India and Sri Lanka has always been a place of crossing. Ancient texts speak of the Bridge of Stones, Rama's Bridge or Adam's Bridge, a causeway of sandbanks stretching from the Indian coast toward the island. Geological studies suggest that these shoals may once have been passable, linking the two lands in shallow waters. To mythology, it became the work of gods and heroes. To memory, it is a reminder that coastlines shift, that what is water today may once have been land. Kumari Kandam, however, lies further to the south, a landmass remembered as immense, extending far into the ocean. Tamil traditions speak of it as divided into regions, ruled by Pandyan kings who patronized learning, poetry, and sacred rites. The ancient literary academies of the Sangam age, gatherings of poets and sages, are said to have flourished upon its soil. The idea that such a civilization could be erased by flood finds echoes across world mythologies. The deluge of Mesopotamia, the sinking of Atlantis, the drowned lands of Lyonesse in Celtic lore. It is as though the memory of great floods lies deep in human consciousness, passed down through story when stone and earth are lost. Sri Lanka itself bears traces of antiquity that deepen the sense of mystery. Offshore surveys in the Gulf of Mannar and along the island's southern coast have recorded unusual formations. Rectangular outlines, massive boulders arranged in patterns, and submerged ridges suggestive of walls or harbour structures. Some divers report platforms that seem carved, though the sea has eroded and encrusted them with coral. The difficulty lies in proof. The ocean covers its secrets well, and what may be the remnants of human hands are easily mistaken for geological oddities. Yet the allure of the possibility remains, especially when placed alongside traditions that speak of cities long drowned. The Tamil epics and Puranas refer to repeated losses of land to the sea. They speak of Pandyan kings compelled to move their capitals further inland, of temples reclaimed by the tide, of poets lamenting a homeland no longer reachable. Each telling carries both grief and reverence. Grief for what was lost, reverence for the sea that both nurtures and consumes. The concept of Kumari Kandam is not merely a myth of destruction, it is also a myth of origins, a way of saying that culture, language, and wisdom arose from a land now hidden. Comparative studies draw parallels between Kumari Kandam and the idea of Lemuria, a hypothetical continent, once proposed by 19th century geologists to explain the distribution of species across the Indian Ocean. Although the scientific concept was later set aside, it fused with Tamil lore in a powerful way, reinforcing the idea of a submerged southern landmass. Here, scientific speculation and traditional memory intertwine, creating a narrative that still holds sway in cultural imagination. To walk the beaches of Sri Lanka at dawn, when the ocean is quiet and the horizon pale, is to feel that sense of something more, a vastness beneath the waves that is not entirely explained by water alone. The island's fishermen speak of places offshore where the sea floor rises suddenly, where nets catch upon unseen shapes. Some tell of stones deep below that resemble walls or temples. For them, Kumari Kandam is not an abstract myth, but a living inheritance, woven into daily life and maritime lore. Archaeologists, cautious by nature, seek verifiable evidence. They measure, they map, they compare. Yet even in their hesitations, they acknowledge the persistence of memory, that traditions passed through centuries often preserve truths even if altered by time. The memory of great floods is now confirmed in multiple parts of the world, tied to the end of the Ice Age, when rising seas drowned vast coastlines and forced migrations. It is within this context that Kumari Kandam gains resonance, as a regional expression of a global human memory of loss. Sri Lanka itself bears witness to the sea's power. The tsunami of 2004 devastated its coasts, taking tens of thousands of lives. In the aftermath, villagers reported that the ocean had briefly revealed ancient features: stone lines beneath the water, patterns in the sand that seemed architectural. Whether these were genuine structures or the play of the sea, the accounts echo an old pattern. Catastrophe briefly draws aside the veil, and the hidden world beneath becomes visible. Then the waters return, and the memory passes into story. There is a poignancy in this, the awareness that human achievement, no matter how enduring, is vulnerable before the tides of earth and ocean. The ruins we see are only fragments. The rest may lie beneath silt, coral, and salt, guarded by silence. In this silence, legends grow. They fill the gaps where archaeology has not yet reached, ensuring that memory is not entirely extinguished. Kumari Kandam may never be proved or disproved in the strictest sense. Its true outline may remain forever blurred by waves. Yet in the mythology of Tamil culture, it serves as both a beginning and a warning, a beginning of civilization, and a warning that even the greatest realms can be erased. The vanished shores of Sri Lanka remind us that history is not only written on land, it is also buried in the sea, awaiting those who have the patience to listen. As the tide rises along the southern coast, the horizon deepens into dusk. The fishermen bring in their nets, the temples along the shore glow with lamplight, and the sea begins its nightly song against the rocks. Somewhere beneath those waters, whether in stone or only in memory, lie the outlines of a continent lost. Its presence is not seen but felt, a quiet weight beneath the surface, whispering of worlds erased, yet not entirely forgotten. Chapter 14. Xicheng. The Lion City beneath Qiandao. Lake. Beneath the still, jade-green waters of eastern China's Qiandao Lake lies a city few eyes have seen, yet one that has not perished. Xicheng, the Lion City, once thrived as a walled settlement at the foot of Wushu Mountain, a place of gates and markets, courtyards and bridges. Today it rests in silence, submerged by the rising waters of a reservoir. What makes Xicheng unlike most drowned cities, however, is the strange paradox of its preservation. Where flood and tide usually erase, here the waters have guarded and sealed. Stone walls remain upright, arches still curve above doorways, and stairways descend into streets where no footsteps now fall. Qiandao Lake, meaning Lake of a Thousand Islands, was born in 1959, when the valley of the Shinan River was dammed to create a vast hydroelectric project. More than 2,300 villages were relocated, thousands of years of farmland surrendered, and entire towns were drowned to feed the demands of modern progress. Among them was Xicheng, a city more than 2,300 years old, whose foundations stretched back to the Eastern Han dynasty. Its towers and stone lions, its richly carved gatehouses and inscribed tablets, all were abandoned as the water rose. People left their homes knowing they would never return. The surface closed above, and Xicheng vanished. Yet unlike ruins left to the open air, where rain, wind and time gnaw slowly at every edge, the waters of Qiandao Lake have acted as a protective cloak. At depths of 25 to 40 meters, shielded from sunlight, temperature shifts and storms, Xicheng's streets and buildings remain astonishingly intact. Divers who descend into the cool depths describe a world frozen in time. Ornate city gates standing as if they still await visitors, carved dragons coiled upon stone, timber beams long dissolved, but masonry still crisp. It is as though the city waits, slumbering, in an eternal twilight. Xicheng was once a vibrant county seat, strategically placed at the confluence of trade routes in Zhejiang province. Its very name, the Lion City, derived from the great mountain that loomed above it, Wu Xishan, the Five-Lion Mountain. Inscriptions carved into stone tell of its gates and towers, 5 in number, marking the cardinal directions. Within the walls, narrow streets wound between homes and shops, leading towards squares and temples. The city endured through dynasties, weathering centuries of change. from Tang to Ming to Qing, its walls absorbing the footsteps of countless generations. When the waters covered Shicheng, what was lost above the surface became preserved below it. Archaeologists who have surveyed its remains describe it as a time capsule, offering a rare window into Ming and Qing-era urban life. Bridges of stone still arch across what were once canals and streams. Pavements retain the wear of cartwheels. Wooden window frames have vanished, but inscriptions, carvings, and ornamental details remain sharp. Statues of lions and phoenixes stand beside lotus motifs and dragons, symbols of fortune and guardianship, now guardians of silence beneath the water. The paradox of Shicheng is that it is both destroyed and preserved. No one lives within its walls. The streets echo only with currents. Yet in its solitude, it is more whole than ruins exposed to centuries of weathering. Other ancient cities across the world have been worn into fragments by the air. Shicheng, however, was sealed away in an instant, its architecture locked in place. It has become a museum beneath water, inaccessible, untouchable, yet astonishingly complete. Divers who enter this submerged labyrinth describe a strange quiet. At such depths, light filters only dimly, giving the city a dreamlike quality. The water stills every sound. Bubbles trail past the outlines of doorways and vanish above. A sense of dislocation overtakes the visitor. Here is a city that should bustle with life, yet every corner lies hushed. Some compare it to walking through a forgotten stage set, perfectly prepared for a performance that never arrives. Others say it feels as though the city itself is dreaming, holding its breath through centuries. The preservation of Shicheng has become a gift to archaeologists, though a challenging one. Unlike land-based ruins, access requires diving equipment and carefully monitored exploration. Maps of its layout have been created using sonar and photography, revealing the extent of its urban plan. What is visible suggests that Shicheng was not merely a provincial town, but a place of wealth and artistry. Its gates, with their intricate carvings, reveal the craftsmanship of masons who labored to create beauty as well as defense. Inscriptions honor the patrons who commissioned them, names now suspended in water, yet still legible. The cultural layers within Shicheng stretch across dynasties. The city once bustled with traders carrying silk and ceramics, with officials recording taxes and decrees, with villagers offering prayers at temples. Each dynasty left its imprint in architecture, from the sturdiness of Han foundations to the flourishes of Qing design. Within its submerged streets, history overlaps, layered and intact. Unlike ruins that erode into rubble, here the continuity remains, doors still framed, steps still leading to thresholds. Chandao Lake itself, created for the Zinanjiang Dam, now attracts tourists who sail across its surface, admiring the 1,000 forested islands that rise from the flooded valley. Few realize that beneath the waters, invisible, lies not only Shicheng but also smaller villages, fields and pathways once alive with human life. The reservoir holds both beauty and absence, a landscape both created and erased by human hands. For China, it reflects the tension between progress and memory, between the drive to harness rivers for power and the cost of burying the past. And yet, Shicheng's story is gentler than that of cities lost to sudden catastrophe. Unlike Atlantis, swallowed without warning, or coastal towns claimed by tsunamis, Shicheng was surrendered knowingly. Its people carried away what they could. They said farewell to temples and homes, leaving behind stone that could not be moved. The flood was deliberate, not natural, but its result is similar. A city hidden, unseen, and preserved beneath the depths. For those who explore its ruins, Shicheng inspires a kind of reverence. It reminds us that civilization is fragile, that what feels permanent can vanish in a season, yet also that memory can survive in unexpected ways. The carvings on its gates are still there, waiting to be read. The lions still guard their thresholds. The streets, though silent, still wind as they once did. The city is gone, yet not gone. An echo held within water, where absence becomes a form of presence. As the sun sets over Chandao Lake, the waters shimmer in hues of gold and crimson. Boats drift across the surface, their wakes rippling outward in widening circles. Below, unseen, Shicheng lies in darkness, its walls untouched by the setting light. The city endures not in the living bustle of human activity, but in the stillness of memory preserved in stone. It is a reminder that water is both destroyer and guardian, that what it claims, it sometimes also protects. Shicheng sleeps beneath the quiet lake, beneath the thousand islands. It waits in silence as though listening. Perhaps one day it will rise again into the light, but for now it remains what it has become. A lion city of shadows, held in the embrace of water, suspended between past and present. A dream of stone resting beneath the endless green depths. Chapter 15. The Temple of the Sea Peoples. In the shadowed centuries of the late Bronze Age, the Mediterranean trembled with change. Between 1200 and 900 BCE, the world of great palaces and bronze-clad armies unraveled. Egypt, the Hittite Empire, Mycenaean Greece, all bore the scars of fire, famine, and collapse. And in the heart of this mystery, inscribed upon broken tablets and carved into stone reliefs, a haunting name appears: the Sea Peoples. Their origins remain hidden in the haze of prehistory. Some scholars imagine them as displaced Aegean mariners, forced from their homelands by drought or earthquakes. Others trace them to Anatolia, to the islands of the central Mediterranean, or to forgotten harbours along the Black Sea. Egyptian inscriptions call them by many names: Shurden, Shekelesh, Lukka, Peliset, but together they were remembered simply as those who came from the sea. The records tell of their sudden arrival, like a storm upon the coasts. In the reign of Pharaoh Merneptah, around 1207 BCE, the Egyptians fought waves of invaders who sailed across the Mediterranean in swift, crescent-shaped ships. Only a few years later, under Ramesses III, the Sea Peoples returned in force, joined by families, ox carts, and children. An entire migration, rather than a single raiding fleet. The inscriptions of Medinet Habu, the mortuary temple of Ramesses, still show the carved images. Warriors in feathered headdresses, round shields raised, battling beneath sails striped with colour. They came as both soldiers and settlers, pressing against the last great powers of the Bronze Age. The story of the Sea Peoples is not one of mere war, but of disappearance and enigma. After a century of upheaval, the name fades. Their kingdoms, if they had them, dissolved into the patchwork of new cultures that followed. And yet traces linger, in pottery, in weapons, in the ruins of cities they struck. Along the Levantine coast, submerged beneath shifting sands and waters, lie broken harbours and drowned foundations that some whisper may belong to their passage. The Temple of the Sea Peoples, as some divers and researchers call it, is one such site. A cluster of stone blocks beneath the eastern Mediterranean, lying in shallow but turbulent waters off the coast of modern-day Israel. The ruins, barely visible beneath the waves, show signs of planned construction. Large hewn stones arranged in rectangular outlines, as though once forming walls or platforms. Nearby lie fragments of amphorae, their shapes echoing those of late Bronze Age trade pottery. The sea has worn them smooth, yet still they speak of a time when ships anchored offshore, unloading goods, weapons, or perhaps even sacred offerings. Some archaeologists argue that these foundations are remnants of Canaanite or Philistine temples, cultures intertwined with the legacy of the Sea Peoples. Others remain cautious, noting how little has been confirmed. But for those who dive among the stones, the sensation is unmistakable, the presence of a forgotten story. The Philistines, remembered from biblical texts as adversaries of early Israel, are believed by many scholars to descend from these mysterious mariners. Their arrival in the Levant around the 12th century BCE coincides with the collapse of the Bronze Age kingdoms. Pottery styles of Aegean design suddenly appear in the coastal cities of Ashkelon, Ashdod, and Gaza. Grains, oils, and architectural forms shift in ways suggesting an influx of new peoples, carrying with them traditions from across the sea. Could the Temple of the Sea Peoples, half buried in sand and surf, have been one of their sanctuaries? A place where rituals were offered to gods carried from distant homelands? The answer remains elusive. The Mediterranean itself was a stage of immense upheaval during those centuries. Earthquakes rippled through the Aegean, prolonged drought withered harvests. Trade networks that had connected Egypt, Anatolia, and Mesopotamia for centuries suddenly fractured. Into this instability, the Sea Peoples arrived, both destroyers and survivors. Their raids toppled cities already weakened. Their migrations reshaped coastlines already vulnerable. The collapse of the Bronze Age was not their doing alone, but they were among its most vivid agents. In the carved inscriptions of Medinet Habu, the Egyptians boasted of their victory. Ramesses III declared that he had annihilated the invaders, driving them into the sea. Yet the story was not so final. Fragments of their culture endured, Along the Levant, coastal enclaves grew into the Philistine Pentapolis, 5 great cities that flourished in the Iron Age. The very word Philistine may echo one of their ancient names, Peliset. Their temples, their rituals, and their trade would echo in history long after Egyptian scribes declared their destruction. But the deeper origins of the Sea Peoples remain unsettled. Were they displaced Mycenaean Greeks fleeing the collapse of their palatial centres? Were they Sardinians, Sicilians, or Anatolian Luwians carried eastward by tides of migration? Or were they a confederation of many groups, bound not by a homeland, but by the sea itself? A people forged in ships, born of harbours, who belonged not to one land, but to many coasts. The sea, which erases and conceals, has kept their story fragmented, like the ruins half buried along the Levantine shore. Divers who descend upon the supposed temple site describe a silence filled only by the hiss of bubbles and the surge of current. Stones loom suddenly from the sand, their edges softened by centuries of waves, yet their alignment unmistakably deliberate. Some lie in patterns suggestive of courtyards or walls. Others, massive and isolated, seem like pillars toppled long ago. Seagrass sways between them, and small fish dart through shadowed recesses. To swim there is to drift through a space where myth and archaeology meet, where the name of the Sea Peoples ceases to be an abstraction and becomes something tactile, something one can almost reach out and touch. The Levantine coast itself bears witness to the upheavals of that forgotten era. Inland, ancient Canaanite cities show burn layers dated to the 12th century BCE. Their walls collapsed, their pottery scattered. Some may have fallen to earthquakes, some to famine, others to invaders. Yet the stories converge with eerie consistency. Destruction from the Sea Peoples, whoever they were, left a mark that endures not in monuments of glory, but in the silence of broken cities, in the drowned outlines of harbours once filled with sails. Comparative mythologies from across the region echo faintly with similar motifs. Peoples who rose from the sea, who came in ships, who brought both destruction and renewal. In Greek tradition, echoes of wandering tribes displaced from fallen Troy might align with these movements. In Levantine memory, tales of invaders arriving from distant isles recall the same tide. Even Egyptian hymns speak of foreign waves pressing against their shores. The Temple of the Sea Peoples, if it truly was theirs, would not be a solitary monument, but part of a greater rhythm. A memory preserved not in one land, but across an entire sea. Today, the stones rest largely unseen. Currents bury and reveal them by turns, as though the sea itself hesitates to give up the full story. Archaeologists chart, measure, and debate, but certainty remains out of reach. Perhaps that is fitting, for the Sea Peoples themselves were never a fixed nation, but a movement, a shadow, a tide. Their temple, if that is what lies beneath the waves, belongs not only to them, but to the mystery of the sea itself, which conceals as much as it reveals. And so the Mediterranean continues its eternal rhythm, waves rolling against the same shores they once approached in fleets of war. Fishermen sail above waters that hide ancient walls. Sunlight breaks across the surface, but below, the ruins remain in dim quiet. The Temple of the Sea Peoples endures as a question, as an echo of migrations that reshaped an age, as a reminder that history is not only written in stone, but also drowned in silence. In this silence, perhaps we come closest to them, not through answers, but through the awareness of what is lost. They came from the sea, and into the sea they vanished, and there still they wait. Chapter 16, The Gulf of Cambay. Anomaly beneath the restless waters of India's western coast, where the tides of the Arabian Sea surge into the broad estuary of the Gulf of Cambay, lies a riddle that refuses to fade. In 2001, as part of routine marine surveys, a sweep of sonar traced lines across the sea, floor, and what appeared on those. Screens would ignite one of the most contested debates in South Asian archaeology. The sonar images revealed not the random scatter of rock and sand normally expected beneath such turbulent waters, but straight alignments, right angles, and geometric forms. Long linear features ran parallel to one another, intersected at points that seemed deliberate, and outlined what looked, at least to the human eye, like the foundations of buildings, streets, and plazas. Some reconstructions suggested a grid-like pattern stretching for several kilometers, a design evocative of ancient cities, not natural seabed. In those days, The waters were particularly difficult to explore. The Gulf of Cambay is notorious for its dangerous currents and shifting silts, which swirl with monsoon-fed rivers that empty into the Gulf. Visibility beneath the waves is almost nil. Divers report being able to see only a few inches ahead, their beams swallowed by suspended sediments. And yet, despite these obstacles, small artifacts were recovered, pieces of stone, fragments of what looked like pottery, even worked materials that some claimed bore unmistakable traces of human craftsmanship. The initial dating of these finds caused a stir. Carbon analysis of a few samples of wood and other materials suggested ages of around 9,000 years before present, far older than the Indus Valley civilization, older even than the great cities of Mesopotamia. If accurate, these numbers would place the anomaly in the early Holocene, an age when the last ice sheets were retreating and global seas were rising rapidly from the meltwaters of a world transformed. The implications were immense. Could India have harbored a complex, urban-scale settlement long before the known dawn of civilization? Could the Gulf of Cambay preserve evidence of a culture erased by floods at the end of the last ice age? The questions spread quickly beyond the halls of archaeology, stirring the imagination of those who saw in these images the shadow of a forgotten epoch. Yet the controversy was immediate and sharp. Many scholars urged caution. The recovered artifacts, they argued, were sparse, disturbed by currents, their context uncertain. Natural processes, too, can carve geometric forms. Fractures in stone, erosion, and the slow grinding of tides can produce alignments that mimic design. Without systematic excavation, without a stratigraphic record, conclusions could not be firm. The Gulf of Cambay, with its violent tides and relentless silts, seemed to defy proper excavation. What was glimpsed through sonar, critics insisted, might be an illusion born of the human tendency to see order in chaos. But the anomaly would not recede into obscurity. The structures appeared too regular, too suggestive of pattern. And in the cultural memory of India, the notion of lands lost to the sea resonates deeply. Ancient texts speak of vanished realms, submerged beneath rising waters. Tamil traditions recall Kumari Kandam, a continent said to have stretched far south into the Indian Ocean before it was swallowed by the sea. In the Sanskrit epic of the Mahabharata, there are passages that describe ancient floods, cities lost, and migrations born from drowning lands. The Gulf of Cambay, lying between the mouths of great rivers and the open Arabian Sea, seemed to echo these mythic accounts. Geologists studying the region note that around the close of the Pleistocene, sea levels rose by over 100 meters, flooding vast stretches of coastal plains. What are now continental shelves were once river valleys and fertile basins, habitable lands where early societies may have thrived. It is not impossible, they argue, that human settlements existed along these coasts, only to be erased as the seas advanced. If the sonar lines do indeed mark foundations, then the Gulf of Cambay might hold one of the few surviving glimpses into that submerged world. The sonar traces showed what some claim to be the outlines of large platforms, possibly as long as 500 meters, as well as rectangular shapes that aligned like streets. Aerial reconstructions of the maps revealed patterns uncannily similar to planned cities, with central axes, courtyards, and what might be granaries or public spaces. Such designs, if truly ancient, would rewrite the timeline of human civilization. For in 7000 BCE, humanity was believed to be still in the Neolithic stage, scattered in small farming villages, without monumental architecture or large-scale urban design. Skepticism, however, remains strong. Archaeology depends on context, on layers of soil, on sequences of artifacts sealed in time. In Cambay, the seafloor shifts constantly. Rivers deposit thousands of tons of sediment each year, burying and unburying whatever lies below. Wood washed downriver may lodge in the seabed, and later appear in samples, skewing dates. Stones fractured by tidal action may resemble cut blocks. The truth lies hidden not only by the sea, but by the very nature of the Gulf itself, which erases clarity with every passing tide. Still, the anomaly stirs something beyond science, a recognition of how fragile our maps of the past truly are. Humanity clings to a narrow band of time, a few thousand years of written record, while beyond that horizon lies tens of millennia of forgotten lives. If a city did once stand upon the plains of Cambay, then its story is one of disappearance, drowned in silence, and even if it is only the play of stone and current, the question it asks remains powerful. How much of human history lies hidden beneath the sea? For those who believe the Gulf of Cambay marks an ancient metropolis, the narrative deepens. They imagine a culture contemporary with Göbekli Tepe in Anatolia, or with the early Neolithic settlements of Jericho and Çatalhöyük, a culture perhaps linked by trade routes to distant lands, experimenting with architecture, agriculture, and symbolism. When the seas rose, they say, these people were forced inland, their coastal homes abandoned to the waters. In time, their memory became myth, their monuments scattered beneath the tides, and yet, in the silence of the Gulf, no definitive answers emerge. Expeditions are rare, hampered by cost and conditions. Academic caution remains firm, unwilling to claim what cannot yet be proven. But the sonar images endure, drifting through journals, conferences, and whispered debates. Images of right angles on the sea floor, of walls where no walls should be, of a city that may or may not exist. There is a certain symmetry in the fact that the sea, which preserved these forms, is also what prevents their full unveiling. The waters that drown them are the same waters that guard them, swirling in endless currents that obscure, distort, and protect. The Gulf of Cambay anomaly remains not only a question of archaeology, but a metaphor for the human past itself, glimpsed only in fragments, hinted at by patterns, always half concealed. And so, the anomaly lingers at the edge of history, neither confirmed nor denied, neither wholly embraced nor dismissed. A possibility suspended in salt water, where the line between geology and civilization blurs. For the seeker of ancient truths, it is a reminder that the story of humanity is far older, far deeper than the narrow chapters we hold in hand. The earth has buried much, the sea has buried more, and in the quiet beneath the waters of Cambay, the shapes still rest, whether temple, palace, or only stone aligned by chance. The currents roll over them, year after year, as they have for millennia. The debate continues above, while below, in the silence of the Gulf, the mystery endures. Chapter 17. The Lost Coastlines of Indonesia. There are places on this planet where the land itself seems to whisper of something missing. Indonesia, with its scattered islands and restless seas, is one of them. Today it appears as an archipelago, a necklace of volcanic peaks and emerald jungles stretching across the equator. But in the deep memory of the Earth, it was once something more. 20,000 years ago, during the last ice age, the oceans were held back by vast walls of ice. Sea levels were more than 100 meters lower than they are today. The islands we know as Sumatra, Java, Borneo, and Bali were not islands at all, but part of a single immense landmass, joined to the continent of Asia. This drowned continent, known as the Sunda Shelf, was a place of rivers and plains, forests and coastlines, extending hundreds of kilometers further out than the modern shores. If one could step back into that vanished world, one would find fertile river valleys feeding into broad deltas, hunting grounds stretching far into what are now the seabeds of the Java Sea and the South China Sea. Human beings lived there. We know this because tools, bones, and traces of fire have been found in the caves and uplands that remain above the water. Yet what is missing is the Great Plain itself, a landscape that may have sheltered tens of thousands, perhaps millions of people, erased beneath the rising seas that accompanied the end of the Pleistocene. When the ice sheets began to collapse around 12,000 years ago, sea levels rose with terrifying speed. In places, the waters advanced meters within a single human lifetime. Villages, forests, hunting grounds, and sacred places would have been swallowed by the tides. The lowlands of the Sunda Shelf became a drowned world, its people driven inland, its stories carried only in memory and myth. This slow but relentless catastrophe coincides with a period in global history when myths of floods appear again and again. In the Sanskrit texts of India, there is the tale of Manu, warned of a great flood and guided by a divine being to safety. In Mesopotamia, Utnapishtim survives a deluge that drowns the world. Even in the traditions of island Southeast Asia, stories are told of lands that sank beneath the waters, of coastlines that were once broad and green, now vanished beneath the waves. The Sunda Shelf may well be the forgotten stage upon which some of these myths were born, for as the waters advanced, they reshaped the very identity of Southeast Asia. What was once a continental extension became thousands of fragmented islands. A culture that may have been coastal, riverine, and interconnected was broken apart, leaving only echoes in oral traditions. Archaeologists have long wondered what lies beneath those drowned plains. Sonar mapping of the seabed has revealed features that resemble ancient river systems. Submerged channels that once carried water across the shelf, now buried under sediment. These rivers would have created fertile floodplains, the kind of environments where early societies thrive. But without excavation, the presence of settlements remains only speculation. The currents and sediments of the Java Sea make exploration difficult, much like the turbulent waters of the Gulf of Cambay in India. What is hidden beneath remains hidden still. Yet there are hints. Along the present coasts of Indonesia, early cave art and habitation sites suggest a sophistication not always credited to Ice Age peoples. In Sulawesi, red ochre paintings of hand stencils and animals date back more than 40,000 years, among the oldest art known anywhere on Earth. These works suggest that the people of the Sunda region possessed symbolic thought, ritual life, and perhaps even mythologies that extended into deep prehistory. If such people lived on the drowned plains of Sunda, what traces of their world now rest beneath the waves? Were there coastal villages along those vanished rivers? Were there sacred sites, places of gathering, or monuments of stone and wood now long decayed? Or was it a quieter life, ephemeral in its traces, yet rich in memory? The waters have taken the evidence, leaving only questions. Some researchers have gone further, suggesting that the Sunda Shelf may have been home to advanced cultures, forgotten chapters of human history erased by the flood. These claims remain controversial, not accepted by mainstream scholarship. Yet they persist, fed by the possibility that so much land, so much potential habitation, could vanish with almost no trace. In a world where Göbekli Tepe in Turkey demonstrates that monumental construction existed as far back as 9600 BCE, the idea of a contemporaneous culture in Southeast Asia is not impossible, only unproven. The scale of loss is difficult to comprehend. Imagine the coastlines of modern Southeast Asia extended outward by hundreds of kilometers. Imagine Borneo and Sumatra fused with the mainland, their rivers joining into vast deltas where trade and travel may have flourished. Imagine thousands of square kilometers of fertile land now gone. Such a place, if it harbored human settlement, would have been among the most important cultural landscapes of the ancient world. Its disappearance may have been one of the great upheavals in the story of our species. The memory of that flood still lingers, if only in fragments. Across Indonesia, folklore speaks of lost islands, of drowned lands, of people forced to move inland as the seas claimed their homes. In Bali, legends recall times when the sea was much further away. In Java, traditions tell of land swallowed by the ocean in a single night. Myth, history, and geology blur together here, each offering a shard of a larger truth. To explore the lost coastlines of Indonesia is to walk a boundary between knowledge and silence. We know the seas rose. We know the land was vast and that people lived upon it. But beyond these facts lies only the unknown. Were those people hunter-gatherers clinging to survival? Or were they the bearers of early civilizations? Builders of towns and temples erased without trace? The currents whisper one answer, the myths whisper another, and archaeology waits in between. In time, new technologies may help. Deep sea mapping, autonomous submersibles, and sediment analysis may reveal the traces of settlements, hearths, or tools beneath the waters. Already, marine archaeology has found harbors and structures along coasts once thought barren. Perhaps in the coming decades, the Sunda Shelf will yield its secrets. Or perhaps the sea will keep them, as it has for 12,000 years, guarding them beneath layers of silt and silence. The lost coastlines of Indonesia remind us of how fragile human history is. We tend to see the world as stable, its continents fixed, its seas eternal. Yet in the span of human memory, the seas have risen, the lands have shifted, and entire worlds have vanished. Our civilizations are built on the thin surface of time, and beneath that surface lies a vast and hidden archive, most of it erased by the tides. As night deepens, imagine the drowned plains of Sunda. Imagine walking along a river that no longer exists, its waters now 100 meters beneath the sea. Imagine the smoke of fires rising from villages, the songs of people carried on the air, the stars above them, the same stars we see tonight. Then imagine the sea advancing, year by year, swallowing fields, forests, and memories, until nothing remains but silence. And so the Sunda Shelf lies hidden, a great lost chapter of human history. It waits beneath the waters of Indonesia, beneath the restless waves of the Java Sea and the South China Sea. Perhaps it holds ruins of stone, perhaps only the bones of animals and the traces of campfires. We cannot yet know, but we feel its presence, like a shadow beneath the waves, a reminder that much of who we are has been forgotten. For now, the sea keeps its secrets, and the lost coastlines of Indonesia rest in silence, guarded by currents, remembered only in myth, awaiting the day when their story may be told again. Chapter 18. The Tragedy of Helicon. The northern coast of the Peloponnesus, where the Gulf of Corinth stretches like a silver ribbon toward the Ionian Sea, there once stood a city. Helic was its name. To its people, it was not just a place of walls and houses, but a seat of devotion and pride. A city dedicated above all to Poseidon, god of the sea and the shifting earth. For centuries it flourished, a hub of trade, of craftsmanship, of worship. And then, one winter's night in 373 BCE, Helice was gone. The story of Helice comes to us through ancient voices, whispered across more than 2,000 years. They tell of a calamity so sudden, so absolute, that it became a parable of fragility. Pausanias, the Greek traveller and chronicler, wrote of it many centuries later. Strabo, the geographer, described its fate. Others compared its destruction to the tale of Atlantis itself. Another city swallowed by the sea. But Helice was no myth. It was real, and its tragedy was remembered because it was witnessed. The sources speak of signs that came before, strange disturbances in the earth, animals fleeing the land, dogs howling without cause. The people of Helice, some say, ignored the warnings. On that fateful night, the ground shook violently. The city collapsed in upon itself, its walls tumbling, its temples falling. Then, as if summoned by its god, the sea rose. A great wave surged inland, swallowing the ruins of the city, its people, its sanctuaries. By dawn, Helice had disappeared beneath the waters. Sailors who passed along the Gulf of Corinth in later years told of a sight both haunting and undeniable. Beneath the clear waters, in calm weather, one could see the remains of columns, of streets, of statues lying broken upon the seabed. For centuries after, Helice lingered as a drowned ghost, visible to those who looked down through the surface, like a warning preserved in silence. The memory of Helice persisted because it fit into a larger pattern of Greek thought, the belief that cities, no matter how prosperous, could be humbled in an instant. Hubris invited downfall, and Helice seemed to embody this truth. Some said the people had offended Poseidon, failing to honor the very god they had once revered. Others saw it as part of the greater rhythm of the world, the cycle of earth and sea that gives and takes without warning. Modern archaeology has confirmed the outlines of this story. Excavations beginning in the 1990s, guided by ancient texts and careful survey, uncovered the remains of Helice not beneath the open sea, but buried under layers of silt and lagoon sediments inland from the present shore. Earthquakes had fractured the land. The soil liquefied in places, causing the foundations of buildings to sink. The sea rushed in and covered what remained. Helice was not only drowned, it was entombed. Within the layers, archaeologists found walls of stone, pottery, coins bearing the imprint of the city, and even the foundations of temples that had once honored Poseidon. The destruction layer was unmistakable. A sudden, catastrophic burial sealed by the forces of earth and water, working in unison. What the ancients described was not invention. It was memory. The tragedy of Helice resonates because it mirrors a larger theme in human history, the fragility of civilization in the face of natural forces. We build, we believe our cities eternal. We carve our names into stone. Yet in a single night, the earth can shake, the sea can rise, and everything is lost. Helice is but one example among many, but it is one of the rare cases where myth, history, and archaeology converge, where the memory of a drowned city proves to be more than legend. To stand on the shores of the Gulf of Corinth today is to sense that memory. The waters seem calm, but beneath them lies a record of violence and erasure. Helice's fate became a warning even to its neighbors. Other Greek cities told and retold the story, embedding it in their understanding of divine justice and cosmic order. To the philosophers of later generations, Helice was proof that Atlantis itself could have been real, that cities could indeed vanish beneath the waves. Yet Helice was not only a cautionary tale, it was also a reminder of how the world itself changes shape. The ground beneath Greece is restless, cut by faults, pressed by tectonic forces. Earthquakes have always been part of its landscape. In the mythology of the Greeks, this restlessness was personified in Poseidon, called the Earthshaker. To dedicate a city to him was to acknowledge both reverence and fear. When Helike was destroyed, the people of Greece interpreted it not as chance, but as the will of the god himself. The silence that followed must have been profound. Survivors from the countryside told of what they had seen, but the city itself left no living voice. Families were extinguished. Temples to Poseidon, once thronged with offerings, were drowned and broken. What had been a center of worship became a ruin beneath the waters, a sacred site inverted into a tomb. Over time, nature reshaped the place. The sediments of rivers buried the ruins further. The lagoon shifted, the shoreline advanced and retreated. For many centuries, the exact location of Helike was lost, even as its story was retold by historians and travelers. It became a mystery, a place spoken of but unseen, until the persistence of modern research brought it once more into the light. The rediscovery of Helike does not diminish its mystery. If anything, it deepens it. To walk among the remains today is to feel the dissonance of time, the echo of streets that once rang with voices, now silent beneath layers of earth. Archaeology can describe the collapse, measure the sediments, analyze the coins, but it cannot restore the lives, the fears, the prayers of those who saw their city destroyed in a single night. In the broader arc of this narrative, Helike stands as one of many cities lost to the sea. Yet it is unique in that it connects so directly with the mythology of Atlantis. Where Plato spoke of a great island swallowed by the ocean, skeptics often dismissed it as allegory. But here, in the Gulf of Corinth, lies proof that the earth itself is capable of swallowing entire communities, erasing them so completely that only myth preserves their memory. Atlantis may remain unproven, but Helike was real. The waters of Greece hold many such memories. Submerged harbors, drowned sanctuaries, entire landscapes altered by earthquakes and tides. The Aegean and Ionian seas are archives as much as they are boundaries, and Helike, with its sudden destruction, stands at the threshold between history and legend. Tonight, as we let the mind drift toward rest, imagine the stillness of that night long ago, broken by the first tremors beneath the earth. Imagine the ground trembling, the lamps falling in the houses, the cries of people rushing into the streets, then the sound of the sea, rising, advancing, a roar that swallows voices, and then silence. When morning came, there was no Helike, only water, and ruins hidden beneath the waves, and so it remains, a memory of fragility, a reminder that the earth we stand upon is never still, and that the sea remembers what it has taken. Helike's story continues, not as a closed chapter, but as part of the wider mystery of civilizations lost to the waters. Chapter 19. The sunken temples of Dwarka, off the northwestern coast of India, where the Gulf of Kambat opens into the Arabian Sea. The waters conceal more than shifting sands and rolling tides. Beneath the waves, there are lines of stone, faint yet deliberate, patterns that do not belong to accident, submerged walls, geometries that hint at streets and harbor-like formations. These are the drowned remains of Dwarka, a city once thought to belong only to myth, spoken of in hymns and epics, remembered as the radiant city of Krishna, and said to have been swallowed by the sea in a single fateful moment. For centuries, Dwarka was a place of story, of devotion, of poetry. In the Mahabharata, one of India's most ancient and vast epics, it is described as a city of dazzling beauty, built upon the western coast by Krishna, the divine hero and guide. Its walls gleamed, its gates were adorned with jewels, its harbors were busy with ships that traveled across distant seas. It was not a mere town, but a seat of cosmic order, a city that bridged the human and the divine. Yet, as the epic tells, its destiny was also fragile. When Krishna departed this world, the city he had founded was abandoned by fate. The ocean rose, and Dwarka was no more. For generations, this tale was treated as allegory. The story of Dwarka, many said, was not history but metaphor, a way of speaking about impermanence, about the transience of all human creation before the eternal sea. But in the late 20th century, explorers and marine archaeologists began to see traces beneath the waters of Gujarat that unsettled the boundary between story and record. Sonar scans revealed shapes too regular to be natural. Divers descended and brought back images of stone walls, of steps and foundations now colonized by coral and silt. At a depth of more than 30 meters, they traced alignments that seemed to belong to a vanished city. Pottery fragments were retrieved, tools and carved stone. Some objects, when tested, carried dates that stretched back not thousands, but many thousands of years, far older than accepted timelines of urban India. The discoveries provoked wonder, but also debate. Could these be the ruins of the Dwarka described in ancient texts? Or were they remnants of some other forgotten coastal culture, erased by rising seas at the end of the last ice age? The questions remain unresolved. What is clear is that these remains belong to human hands, and that they lie beneath waters where no city should be, unless the sea itself had moved. To understand Dwarka, one must return to the stories that kept it alive in memory. The Mahabharata describes a city built on the shore, fortified with walls, its harbors filled with ships, its avenues laid out in order. It was a shining city, a refuge and a capital, and yet it was fated to perish. When Krishna was slain, the ocean claimed Dwarka. Its streets were drowned, its temples toppled, and only the memory endured. Sailors told of seeing towers beneath the waves, glimmering in the depths. In the collective mind of India, Dwarka became a reminder that even divine cities can be lost. When modern divers descended, they found echoes of those verses. Masonry that looked like harbour walls, pillars that may have supported roofs or gates, large blocks fitted together in a style that suggested careful design. The sea had worn them down, and yet the intent remained visible, like a palimpsest beneath the tide. Archaeologists collected stone anchors, many holed blocks once used for mooring ships, scattered across the seabed. These suggested that Dwarka had indeed been a maritime centre, a harbour where vessels from far coasts might have come to trade. The coastline of Gujarat has shifted dramatically over millennia. The sea that is now 20 kilometres from the modern city of Dwarka once lapped directly against its foundations. Geological records show that sea levels have risen and fallen repeatedly since the end of the last glaciation, burying one coast after another. What was once dry land became lagoon, then seafloor. The ruins beneath the Gulf of Kambat are part of this story, testimony that cities stood where waves now break. The question of their age is the most haunting. Some fragments dredged from the seabed have been dated to 9,000 years before the present. If these dates are accurate, they would place Dwarka's origins deep within prehistory, long before Mesopotamia or Egypt raised their first monumental walls. Such a date challenges the accepted timeline of civilization, yet the evidence is contested, for the sea is a difficult keeper of artifacts, and sediments can shift objects from one age to another. What is certain is that there was human settlement here long ago, and that it lies beneath the sea, hidden from view for thousands of years. For the devotee, however, the matter of Dwarka's historicity has always been secondary to its sanctity. The modern city of Dwarka, standing on the shore today, remains one of the holiest sites in Hindu pilgrimage. Its great Dwarkadish temple rises above the sea, its spire visible for miles, its steps leading down toward the waters where pilgrims bathe. Here, they remember the stories of Krishna, and they recall the city that the ocean took. In this way, the memory of Dwarka has never truly been lost. It has lived on in devotion, in ritual, in myth. The ruins beneath the waves give those memories a new dimension. They do not confirm every word of the epic, nor could they, but they whisper that the myth may be rooted in something more than imagination. They remind us that the line between memory and history is porous, especially when the sea itself has moved across the land, erasing what once stood and leaving behind only fragments for us to find. In the quiet of the deep, the ruins rest. Fish swim through what may once have been gates. Coral covers the stones, softening their lines. The sea has made the city part of itself. And yet, for those who look closely, there are still signs of human vision, of walls that once divided space, of harbors that welcomed ships, of temples that reached upward. The tragedy of Dwarka is not only its loss, but its reminder. Civilizations are not permanent. Seas rise, lands shift. Even the most radiant city can vanish in a single turn of time. Yet what is taken is not always erased. It lingers in memory, in text, in ritual. And sometimes, beneath the waves, it lingers in stone. To contemplate Dwarka is to contemplate the depth of India's antiquity. Not the antiquity written in modern timelines, but the antiquity that stretches back beyond record, to ages when the sea lay farther away, and when human communities built cities that we are only beginning to rediscover. Whether Dwarka is the city of Krishna or another forgotten settlement, it opens a window onto that deeper past. The ocean holds its silence. It does not answer. The stones lie where they fell, and the pilgrim who gazes out from the steps of Dwarkadish temple toward the horizon may sense both presences at once. The living city of today, filled with prayers and offerings, and the drowned city beneath, remembered only by the sea. Dwarka remains a place of two worlds, one above, one below, one of myth and devotion, the other of stone and sediment. Together they form a whole that neither science nor faith can claim alone. To drift among its ruins, even in imagination, is to move through that liminal space where history and legend converge. And as night settles over the Arabian Sea, the waters covering Dwarka glimmer with reflected starlight. What was lost remains hidden, but not forgotten. Its memory endures, suspended between the verses of the epic and the silence of the seabed, waiting for those who dare to look deeper. Chapter 20. The Atlantean shadow in the dialogues of Plato, written in the 4th century before our era. There appears a tale that has haunted human imagination more deeply than almost any other. A story of an island, vast and rich, that flourished with great cities, abundant harvests, and ships that roamed across the seas. A realm of knowledge and power, proud in its achievements and radiant in its beauty. And then, as suddenly as it rose, it fell. In a single day and night of misfortune, the island of Atlantis sank beneath the waves, vanishing from the face of the earth. Plato presents the account in two works, the Timaeus and the Critias. He frames it as a story passed down from Solon, the Athenian lawgiver, who had traveled to Egypt nearly 2 centuries earlier. There, in the temples of the Nile, priests are said to have told him of a land beyond the Pillars of Heracles, what we now call the Strait of Gibraltar, a land larger than Libya and Asia combined, where a powerful people dwelled. They waged wars, they mastered the seas, and they extended their dominion deep into the Mediterranean world. But the gods judged them, and the earth itself turned against them. Earthquakes and floods came together, and Atlantis was lost, swallowed by the ocean. For Plato, the tale carried meaning. He offered it as a parable about hubris, about how civilizations collapse when pride outruns wisdom. He placed it in dialogue with his vision of the ideal state, contrasting the simplicity of virtuous Athens with the splendor and corruption of Atlantis. And yet, though it served a philosophical purpose, the story was too vivid, too precise in its geography, too charged with detail, to be dismissed as invention alone. It read less like pure allegory and more like memory. Memory refracted, perhaps across centuries, retold in fragments, but still rooted in something older than Plato himself. For more than 2 millennia, readers have asked, was Atlantis real? Was it a literal island swallowed by the sea, or a symbolic warning disguised as history? Some have sought it in the Mediterranean, in Santorini, where the volcanic island of Thera exploded in fire and ash, destroying the Bronze Age city of Akrotiri around 1600 BCE. Others look to the Atlantic, imagining lost lands upon the ocean floor. Still others trace it to the Americas, to the Canary Islands, or to forgotten coastlines drowned at the end of the Ice Age. The debate has never ended. What matters, though, is not the certainty of Atlantis, but the shadow it casts. Across the world, there are stories of lands that sank, of islands that vanished, of cities lost beneath the sea. From the floodplains of Mesopotamia, to the drowned shelf of Southeast Asia, to the submerged ruins off India's western coast, humanity carries a memory of waters that rose and swept away what had been built. These stories are not identical, yet they resonate with one another. They form a chorus of remembrance, echoing through myth and tradition. Geology confirms that sea levels have not been constant. At the end of the last ice age, as glaciers melted and oceans swelled, coastlines retreated by hundreds of kilometers. Whole continental shelves were drowned. Lands once populated by human communities were swallowed by the sea. To those who lived there, the change was not abstract. It was the destruction of homes, temples, and fields, the vanishing of entire landscapes. It is no wonder, then, that human memory has preserved visions of sunken lands. The Egyptian priests who told Solon of Atlantis spoke from a land steeped in deep time. Along the Nile, they preserved annals that stretched back further than the Greeks could imagine. To them, the story of Atlantis may not have been allegory at all, but a fragment of much older memory, a recollection of floods, of drowned kingdoms, of worlds erased by water long before the Greek city-states rose to prominence. When Plato wove that memory into his dialogues, he gave it form, but not necessarily invention. Consider too the structure of the tale. Atlantis was said to be a circular city, built with rings of land and sea. A central acropolis rose at its heart, surrounded by concentric canals, bridges and walls plated with metals that gleamed in the sun. This was no vague legend, but an architect's vision. And when archaeologists study ancient urban forms, they find echoes, not of Atlantis itself, but of the same impulse toward harmony and symmetry. From the planned cities of the Indus Valley to the ritual centers of Mesoamerica, the image of Atlantis resonates because it mirrors patterns that human beings have built again and again, across continents and millennia. Yet Atlantis is more than architecture. It is a shadow cast over history. For if the story is not entirely invention, then it suggests that civilizations older than Greece, older than Egypt, may have risen and fallen, leaving only faint traces behind. Mainstream timelines speak of civilization as beginning around 5,000 or 6,000 years ago, with the first cities of Sumer and the Nile. But what if there were chapters before this, submerged and forgotten? Atlantis lingers at the edge of that possibility, reminding us that the ocean conceals more than we know. Modern technology has begun to glimpse what lies beneath. Sonar scans of continental shelves reveal drowned river systems, ancient shorelines, and sometimes the patterns of what could be man-made structures. Divers off the coasts of Japan, India, and the Mediterranean have found ruins beneath the waves, raising questions about when and where the first true cities may have stood. Each discovery adds weight to the possibility that Plato's story was not singular, but part of a global pattern. The shadow of Atlantis stretches into comparative mythology as well. In the Celtic traditions of Western Europe, there are tales of Baiae, a magnificent city built below sea level, which was swallowed by the ocean after its gates were left open in negligence. In the Pacific, Polynesian myths speak of Hawaii and other vanished homelands, swallowed by the rising tides. In the Americas, stories among the Maya and the Hopi recall lands drowned by floods, forcing survivors to migrate to higher ground. Each of these carries its own local meaning, and yet together they form a tapestry that feels older than any single culture. Perhaps Atlantis is not one place, but many, not one city, but the memory of all the cities that the sea has taken. Plato's story becomes then a vessel, a container into which we pour the collective memory of loss. It is an allegory, yes, but an allegory anchored in human experience, in the trauma of landscapes that disappeared. Still, the question lingers. Was there an Atlantis, a singular island beyond the pillars of Heracles, a real place that vanished? If so, where are its stones, its artifacts, its unmistakable remains? The sea holds silence, and our tools are only beginning to peel back its surface. The ocean floor is vast, and the ruins of any city would lie buried beneath layers of sediment. To search for Atlantis is to search for a ghost in the depths, a shadow at the edge of knowledge, and yet, even without certainty, Atlantis endures. It endures because it speaks to something deep within the human mind, the awareness of fragility, the recognition that no matter how radiant a civilization may be, it stands upon shifting ground. The earth moves, the seas rise, and time erases. Atlantis reminds us of what can be lost, and of how easily memory becomes myth. As night falls over the ocean, one might imagine the faint outline of a city below, its rings of land and water glimmering in the moonlight. A city of silence now, but once filled with voices, with ships, with temples that reach toward the sky. Whether real or imagined, Atlantis is part of us. It is a mirror of our hopes and our fears, our pride and our impermanence. It remains in shadow, where myth and history meet, neither fully gone nor fully found, a question, suspended between worlds, and so we leave it, for now, resting beneath the sea, in silence. Chapter 21. Maps of Forgotten Shores. In the vaulted chambers of old archives, among the brittle pages and ink-stained parchments, there are maps that do not belong. They whisper of lands seen too clearly, too long before they should have been known. They depict coastlines with uncanny accuracy, drawn centuries before modern surveying, before satellites, before the instruments of precision navigation. They are fragments of a memory older than the hands that traced them. Among these enigmatic documents, one has drawn the most wonder and the most unease, the Piri race map. It was in the year 1513 that Piri ibn Haji Mehmed, known to history as Piri Reis, an Ottoman admiral, navigator, and cartographer, completed a world map on gazelle skin parchment. Only part of it survives today, a torn fragment preserved in the Topkapi Palace in Istanbul. But even this fragment is enough to disturb our understanding of history. On its surface, one sees the outlines of the Atlantic Ocean, the western coast of Africa, the eastern edge of South America, and stretching southward, the suggestion of an icy land at the bottom of the world. The map was created less than 2 decades after Columbus's first voyage across the Atlantic, and yet it shows features that should not have been known. The coast of South America is depicted with striking fidelity. Even the curvature of Brazil's coastline, the sweep of the Andes, and river systems reaching into the interior appear as though seen from above. And at the southern margin, beyond where European ships had yet to sail, there lies a shoreline resembling Antarctica, not as it appears today beneath its cloak of ice, but as if the land were bare, mapped in an age when its coasts were free of glacial covering. Piri Reis himself admitted that he did not draw from his own voyages alone. In notes scrawled upon the map, he claimed to have used older charts, some drawn by Arab sailors, others inherited from long-lost Portuguese expeditions, and still others, more mysteriously, traced back to the time of Alexander the Great. The admiral was a compiler, weaving fragments into a single whole, and yet those fragments carry echoes from a deeper past. For centuries, scholars have puzzled over this cartographic enigma. How could a map of the early 16th century contain knowledge beyond the reach of the age? Some argue that it is coincidence, a matter of misinterpreted lines and chance resemblance. Others suggest that coastlines were sketched with inspired guesswork, blending rumor and imagination. Yet for those who look closer, the accuracy is too precise to dismiss so easily. The thought arises, what if the Piri Reis map is not simply an early modern curiosity, but a window into something much older? What if it carries the ghost of ancient charts, drawn in times when the seas were lower, when shorelines looked different, when human memory stretched further back than we now allow? Consider the ice. For more than 30 million years, Antarctica has been buried beneath it, but the last glacial maximum, which ended around 11,700 years ago, brought the ice sheets much closer to today's latitudes. If the coastline of Antarctica truly appears on the Piri Reis map as it is beneath the ice, then such knowledge could only have been gathered in a distant epoch, before the ice covered those lands in its present form. That would place the origin of the data tens of thousands of years before the rise of the great civilizations we know. The Piri Reis map is not alone in its strangeness. Other early cartographic works raise similar questions. The Orontius Phineus map of 1531, drawn in France, also depicts a southern continent remarkably resembling Antarctica, complete with bays and rivers, where none should be visible beneath the ice. The Baiae map of 1737 presents Antarctica not as a single frozen mass, but as 2 distinct landmasses divided by water, a detail confirmed only by 20th century seismic surveys beneath the ice cap. Again and again, across centuries, maps appear to preserve knowledge seemingly impossible for their time. These anomalies form a pattern too compelling to ignore. They suggest that early modern map makers may have drawn not from their own discoveries alone, but from sources long since lost. Sources that perhaps reach back into antiquity, or even further, into prehistory. The idea of forgotten cartography fits uneasily within conventional history, yet echoes of its surface in ancient traditions. In Egypt, the Temple of Neith at Sais, the same temple where Solon heard the tale of Atlantis, was said to contain records of lands across the sea, remembered in hieroglyphic scrolls. In India, the Mahabharata and the Ramayana speak of journeys across vast oceans, with celestial maps guiding the way. In Polynesia, master navigators once crossed the Pacific using star charts carved upon wooden tablets, some encoded in ways modern eyes still struggle to read. Human beings have always mapped their world, in the heavens, in memory, and upon stone, cloth, or skin. What happens when those maps survive, while the cultures that made them are lost? The possibility emerges that fragments of an older maritime legacy, preserved through centuries of transmission, may have reached the hands of Renaissance cartographers. Perhaps sailors of Phoenicia or Carthage, famed for their long voyages, once charted distant coasts. perhaps even earlier peoples, now forgotten, left their imprint in maps that survived in obscure collections, only to be copied and recopied across generations. We know that the Library of Alexandria once held thousands of such works, manuscripts gathered from across the known world, seized from ships that entered its harbour. Many were lost in flames, yet some knowledge may have escaped into other repositories. By the time of Piri Reis, Europe and the Islamic world were already inheritors of Greek, Roman, and Arab traditions of geography. Could it be that within this vast chain of transmission, whispers of a deeper past persisted, encoded in lines upon vellum? The question is not easily answered, but the haunting accuracy of certain maps remains, a silent testimony to knowledge we cannot fully account for. And in that silence, there is room for wonder. The implications stretch beyond geography. If ancient peoples truly mapped the world with such precision, then their seafaring was more advanced than we acknowledge. They would have possessed not only sturdy ships, but also the ability to navigate with remarkable skill, to chart latitudes, to trace coastlines, to preserve their findings for posterity. This would mean that long before Columbus, long before the age of exploration, human beings had already stitched together a vision of the globe. It raises a deeper question still. Who were they? Were they ancestors of known civilizations, or remnants of cultures erased by rising seas at the end of the Ice Age? Was their knowledge preserved deliberately, or by accident, fragments carried forward without full understanding? When we hold the Piri Reis map, or gaze upon its faded ink in Istanbul, we are not only looking at a relic of the Ottoman court, we are peering into a tunnel of time, where the known and the unknown converge. The map becomes a palimpsest, a surface overwritten, yet still carrying the ghostly traces of earlier hands. What remains most haunting is not the certainty of what these maps reveal, but the uncertainty. They open doors, yet leave us standing at the threshold. They remind us that history, as we are taught, is not the whole of human story. Beneath the official timelines lies another current, one that flows deep and silent, surfacing only in fragments, a shard of pottery here, a submerged city there, and sometimes a map that sees too far. As the centuries pass, the parchment grows more fragile, the ink fades, yet the mystery endures. In the flickering candlelight of the scriptorium, in the salt-stained cabins of ships long vanished, and in the whispers of mariners who spoke of lands just beyond the horizon, there is memory, a memory of forgotten shores, and so, as night drifts over the oceans, we may imagine those unseen coasts once more. Lands erased by time, but still inscribed in lines of ink, surviving against all odds, not as answers, but as questions, as shadows on the edge of the known world. Chapter 22. The Global Flood Memory. There are moments in human memory when the earth itself seemed to turn against its inhabitants. Moments when the sky grew dark, when the seas broke their boundaries, when mountains shook and entire lands disappeared beneath the waves. Across the world, in culture after culture, from the earliest clay tablets of Mesopotamia to the oral traditions carried by mountain tribes in the Andes, there lingers one story above all others, the story of a great flood. It is a tale so widespread, so deeply rooted in the fabric of human myth, that to dismiss it as coincidence seems to ignore its resonance. From Sumer to India, from the islands of Polynesia to the icy north of Siberia, peoples who never met, who shared no tongue, recall the same terror, waters rising beyond measure, the drowning of cities, the scattering of survivors, and the fragile rebirth of civilization in the aftermath. Perhaps the most familiar version comes from the Hebrew Bible, the tale of Noah. In it, the world had grown corrupt, and the Creator resolved to cleanse it with water. Noah, chosen for his righteousness, built an ark of gopher wood, vast enough to hold his family and living pairs of every kind. As the rains came down and the fountains of the deep broke open, the earth was swallowed by water. Only when the dove returned with an olive branch did Noah know the flood had ended, and life could begin again. Yet Noah's story is not alone, nor is it the first. Long before, in the city-states of ancient Sumer, a tale was etched upon clay tablets. It tells of Ziusudra, later known as Utnapishtim in the Akkadian epic of Gilgamesh. Warned by the gods of a coming deluge, Ziusudra constructed a massive vessel, sealed with pitch, and brought with him the seed of life. When the storm came, the floodwaters raged for 7 days and 7 nights, annihilating humankind. Only then did the vessel rest upon a mountain, and Ziusudra, like Noah after him, released birds to test the drying earth. The parallels are striking. Two men, separated by centuries and by mythic traditions, each forewarned of an apocalypse, each preserving life within a vessel, each setting it upon high ground as the waters receded. Did one story borrow from the other, or are both fragments of a memory older than writing itself? The question deepens when we look beyond Mesopotamia and the Near East. In India, the Sanskrit texts speak of Manu, the first man, who was warned by a fish that a flood was coming to sweep away all life. The fish, Matsya, was no ordinary creature but an incarnation of Vishnu. Manu built a great boat, and the fish guided him to safety as waters rose and mountains were swallowed. When the flood subsided, Manu performed rituals of renewal, and human life began anew. Thousands of miles away on the other side of the world, the Maya of Central America tell of a time when the gods destroyed an early race of humans with a flood. In their Popol Vuh, these proto-humans were made of wood, and because they lacked souls, they were swept away when the waters came. In Andean tradition, the great civilizer Viracocha is said to have unleashed a deluge that destroyed an earlier age of giants, before fashioning a new humanity upon the mountains of Peru. Even in the Pacific, among Polynesian islanders, there are stories of floods that consumed entire lands. In Hawaii, a tale is told of Nu'u, who survived in a vessel atop Mauna Kea, guided by the gods. In the far north, the Inuit speak of a world overturned by waters, when the land disappeared, and only a few drifted to safety. It is difficult to ignore the pattern. The imagery repeats: a warning, a vessel, survival upon high ground, the rebirth of life after catastrophe. Not merely a myth, but a shared memory, the memory of the earth transformed. Geology tells us that at the end of the last ice age, the world did indeed face cataclysm. Between roughly 14,000 and 8,000 years ago, the vast glaciers that had covered North America, Europe, and Asia melted with breathtaking speed. Sea levels rose by more than 120 meters, swallowing coastlines, drowning river valleys, erasing entire landscapes. Places where early humans had once settled. Fertile plains, low-lying deltas, continental shelves now hidden beneath the sea, vanished beneath the waves. One of the most dramatic events is known as Meltwater Pulse 1A. Around 12,000 years ago, global sea levels are believed to have risen by as much as 20 meters in only a few centuries. Imagine living in a fishing village by the shore, watching as each generation saw the waters creep higher, swallowing fields, temples, and entire settlements. To those who endured it, the sea must have seemed a living force, unstoppable, merciless, consuming the works of humankind. The trauma of such an event would not vanish with time. It would echo down generations, first as memory, then as story, then as myth, carried into every culture that survived. Perhaps this is why the flood story is not bound to one place, but to the whole of humanity. Even the landscapes we know today carry traces of that drowned world. Beneath the English Channel lies Doggerland, a vast plain once connecting Britain to the European continent. It was home to rivers, forests, and settlements until the rising seas claimed it. Beneath the Black Sea, archaeologists have found signs that its shoreline once lay far lower, before a sudden inundation transformed it into the sea we know. Off the coast of India, near Dwarka, beneath the waves of the Gulf of Kampat, lie ruins of walls and streets that hint at settlements drowned long ago. Each discovery is a reminder. What is now sea was once land, and so we ask, are the flood myths merely allegories, teaching of renewal and divine order, or are they the echoes of true events, experienced by ancient peoples who struggled to comprehend the scale of planetary change? The symbolic language of myth always carries layers. The flood may be a cleansing of corruption, the destruction of an old age to prepare for the new. But beneath that symbolism lies a literal memory of a time when the waters did rise, when the horizon swallowed the earth, when humanity learned both its fragility and its resilience. What makes these stories so haunting is their universality. For millennia, isolated by mountains or seas, tribes and civilizations spun myths of their origins. And yet, across the globe, the flood is always there, always returning like the tide. In the deepest sense, it is not just a story of destruction, but of survival, of the few who endured and carried forward the seed of life, the memory of the past and the hope of the future. Tonight, as we drift through these echoes, we are reminded that beneath our cities, beneath the soil, beneath even the seas. There is another layer of history, submerged but not forgotten. The flood myths are not dead relics of superstition. They are living currents, connecting us to ancestors who watched the world change and told their children what they had seen. And perhaps, in their stories, there lingers a warning, not of punishment, but of cycles, that the earth changes, that seas rise and fall, that no city, however proud, is eternal. The flood is memory. The flood is myth. The flood is history written in water. Chapter 23. The silence of the scholars. The quiet corridors of universities, within the pale light of libraries where the air smells of paper and dust. History is ordered and catalogued with precision. There are timelines etched into textbooks, neat sequences of ages and epochs, diagrams that trace the march of civilization as if it were a straight road leading from darkness to light. But the sea does not care for such linearity. Beneath its restless surface lie ruins that do not obey these carefully drawn boundaries. Temples too old, walls too vast, and stones too perfectly cut to belong where orthodox history insists they must. And so, for every stone that rises into the light of scholarship, there are countless more left in silence. Some are dismissed as natural formations, others as errors of interpretation, and some are simply forgotten, avoided, or buried under a tide of academic resistance. It is not that the scholars are blind. Many are brilliant, trained in disciplines that demand rigor and evidence. Yet academia is also a fortress, built of traditions, reputations, and careers. To challenge the foundations of accepted chronology is not a small act. It can unseat entire fields of study, disrupt institutions, and undo the work of generations. For the one who dares to suggest that civilization may be older than we believe, the cost is often exile from the halls of respectability. Consider the challenges of underwater archaeology itself. On land, ruins can be carefully uncovered, mapped, dated, and studied. But beneath the ocean, every step is a struggle against darkness, pressure, and distance. Saltwater corrodes, currents bury, marine life covers, and sediments hide. Even the most advanced diving expeditions allow only minutes of human presence at great depths. Remote operated vehicles and sonar can trace outlines, but they cannot feel the stones, cannot see with the eyes of those who first built them. Funding for such work is scarce, and often tied to projects that promise answers within the accepted framework, not questions that disrupt it. When anomalous sites are discovered, vast cut blocks off the coast of Yonaguni in Japan, submerged walls in the Gulf of Kambat in India, structures lying beneath the Caribbean waters near Cuba, they are met with skepticism. Some scholars say they are natural, others suggest they are misinterpretations, the human mind seeing patterns where none exist. These dismissals are not always given with malice. Often, they are the cautious response of a discipline that has been taught to mistrust extraordinary claims without extraordinary evidence. Yet the silence that follows is telling. The discoveries that could rewrite history rarely receive the funding, the attention, or the academic will to be pursued further. Papers are published in obscure journals. Conferences pass them by, and the mainstream narrative remains undisturbed. There is another reason for this resistance. Archaeology, like all sciences, does not exist in isolation. It is entwined with national pride, cultural identity, and the weight of story. If a submerged ruin in the Pacific were proven to be 10,000 years old, what would that mean for the cradle of civilization said to lie in Mesopotamia? If great cities once stood upon the now drowned shelves of the Atlantic, what would it say of our understanding of prehistory? Each discovery would not only rewrite dates, it would shift the axis of human origin stories, displacing established centers of power, belief, and tradition. And so, silence becomes a shield. Scholars are careful, cautious, reluctant to venture into waters that could leave them stranded. Careers are built upon the mortar of certainty, not upon the waves of speculation. Those who press too far into forbidden archaeology often find themselves labeled not as pioneers, but as outcasts. Yet, outside of the academy, the ruins remain. Fishermen's nets catch upon walls that should not be there. Sonar scans reveal steps and terraces where no natural geology can explain them. Divers glimpse columns, pathways, and carvings, their photographs dismissed, their testimonies brushed aside. The sea continues to whisper secrets, even if the institutions of learning choose not to listen. There is also the practical matter of deep time. To suggest that humans built monumental architecture more than 10,000 years ago is to step beyond the accepted model of hunter-gatherer societies. It implies that complex organization, engineering, and perhaps even lost technologies existed far earlier than our textbooks allow. It asks us to imagine civilizations rising and falling, leaving only fragments beneath the waves. For many scholars, this is not just unlikely, it is unthinkable, and so the silence holds. But silence does not erase curiosity. Around the edges of official history, independent researchers, explorers, and divers continue to ask questions. They risk ridicule to document the inexplicable, to gather evidence where others will not. Their work is imperfect, often criticized for lacking the rigor of established methods. Yet in their persistence, they keep alive the possibility that what lies beneath the sea is more than accident. It is memory. The silence of the scholars is not absolute. There are those within the academy who quietly acknowledge the anomalies. Some argue that sea level rise at the end of the Ice Age must have swallowed entire landscapes where humans once lived. They point to Doggerland in the North Sea, to the submerged shores of the Black Sea, to the drowned plains now hidden under the Persian Gulf. These are recognized by mainstream science as real. Yet even here, there is caution, a careful separation between acknowledging submerged settlements and admitting the possibility of civilizations more advanced than expected. Perhaps the silence is also protective. To open the door to the unknown is to face questions without clear answers, to confront mysteries that may never yield certainty. And for a discipline built on evidence, the unanswerable can feel like a threat. Better, some might say, to remain within the boundaries of what can be proven than to wander into the vast ocean of speculation. Yet the human spirit does not thrive on silence alone. It longs to know what is hidden, to uncover what has been lost. And so the ruins wait, half buried, half remembered. The ocean covers them in quiet, but the questions remain restless. Why does the past resist us? Why does it hide behind water and time, behind the boundaries of what scholars allow themselves to say? Perhaps because the past is not finished with us. Perhaps because the story of humanity is larger than we can yet accept. For now, the silence of the scholars remains. But silence too is a kind of voice. It tells us where the edges lie. It tells us where the questions become dangerous. And it invites us to listen more closely, to look not only at what is said, but at what is left unsaid. And in that quiet space, between what is known and what is forbidden, we may yet begin to hear the echoes of a deeper truth, still waiting beneath the waves. Chapter 24. The Sea as Tomb. The Sea as Archive. There are places where the ocean seems eternal, where its surface stretches unbroken to the horizon, reflecting the light of the stars like a sheet of polished obsidian. To stand at such a shore is to feel the vastness of time, to sense that the waters before you are not only present, but ancient, older than nations, older than the memory of peoples. The sea has watched civilizations rise and vanish. It has taken empires, swallowed kingdoms, and erased entire landscapes. Yet it has also preserved, holding what it has claimed in a slow, quiet embrace. The ocean is both tomb and archive. It destroys, and it remembers. When we think of the ocean as a tomb, we imagine wreckage and ruin. Ships once proud, reduced to skeletons of wood and rusting iron. Temples collapsed, their columns scattered across the seafloor. Cities drowned in silence, their streets filled with silt, their walls softened by coral. All that once lived, buried in a vault of salt and pressure. The sea has no sentiment. It does not grieve. It swallows without hesitation. But if we look more closely, we see that the sea does not erase as fire erases. It buries, it hides, it seals away in darkness. And in this act, it preserves. Wood may rot, cloth may vanish, but stone endures. Pottery endures. The outlines of walls, the forms of streets, the carvings of symbols. They remain, resting in a suspended state of half-life. The sea becomes a kind of library, where the shelves are cliffs and plains of sand, and the books are monuments written in stone. In places like Pavlopetri off the coast of Greece, we can glimpse this dual nature clearly. Beneath only a few meters of water lies a town more than 5,000 years old. Streets still trace their lines. Foundations mark the shapes of homes. Pottery shards lie where they fell. The sea destroyed the life of the city, yet it also froze it, sealing it away until the day divers rediscovered it. The same is true in the waters of the Bay of Cambay in India, where sonar revealed vast geometric patterns beneath layers of sediment. The debate continues over what those shapes mean, whether they are remnants of an ancient city or natural formations. Yet the possibility lingers that here too, the sea has been both destroyer and guardian. If stone blocks, tools, or carvings lie within that mud, they are held not in fire's ashes, but in water's keeping. It is this paradox that gives the ocean its sacred weight. We fear its depths, yet we are drawn to them. We know the sea erases, yet we also know it holds secrets no desert or mountain could preserve. Ice can entomb for millennia, but ice melts. Sand can bury, but winds shift. The sea endures, relentless, patient, sealing away memory in liquid vaults. The ancients must have sensed this. Myth after myth speaks of worlds lost to the sea. Atlantis is the most famous, a tale of a once great island that sank in a single night of fire and flood. But the echoes of this idea ripple outward into other traditions. The Maori of New Zealand tell of lands that slipped beneath the waves. The peoples of the Pacific speak of islands that vanished. The Maya and Aztec preserved stories of floods that erased cities. And the Sumerians wrote of waters that destroyed all but a chosen few. To them, the sea was not only boundary but fate, a line that could shift, advance, and take everything away. Yet in their reverence for the sea, there may also have been an understanding that what was lost was not gone forever, only hidden, that the ocean could be an underworld of memory, a resting place not just for bodies, but for whole civilizations. Archaeologists speak now of continental shelves as lost frontiers of human history. During the last ice age, sea levels were lower by more than 100 meters. Vast plains stretched where water now lies. Rivers cut valleys that are now drowned. These were the homelands of countless people. When the ice melted and the seas rose, they lost not only their houses, but the very ground beneath them. Today, those drowned landscapes form the majority of our planet's memory. Imagine how much of human history lies there. Tools buried in silt, hearths covered by kelp, footprints frozen in clay. The sea has claimed more than land. It has claimed stories, and in doing so, it has become an archive of human beginnings. Divers who descend into such places often speak of the silence. At first, it is the silence of water, muffled sound, the rhythmic hiss of breath. But deeper still, it becomes the silence of time, swimming over the outlines of an ancient street. One feels the weight of all those who walked it, their voices gone, their presence vanished, yet their traces still lying beneath. It is a silence both mournful and reverent, a silence that does not let go. Even shipwrecks bear this duality. The Titanic, lying broken in the North Atlantic, is at once a grave and a museum. It tells us not only of tragedy, but of technology, of craftsmanship, of the culture of its time. In its destruction, it became preservation. So it is with older wrecks. Phoenician galleys, Roman triremes, Viking longships. The sea takes them, yet in taking, it keeps. We might think of the ocean as the Earth's subconscious, the place where memory is submerged, hidden beneath the waves of waking history. To dive is to dream, to enter that deeper mind where the forgotten continues to exist in shadowed form. Archaeology, in this sense, becomes a form of dream interpretation, trying to read what the water has written, to understand what has been kept and why. But unlike fire or desert, the sea is not neutral. It is alive. Currents shift, tides change, tectonic plates move. What is preserved today may be destroyed tomorrow, broken apart by storm or swallowed into the mantle. The ocean keeps, but it also transforms. Coral covers walls, fish swim through doorways, statues become habitats. The sea, in archiving, also rewrites. Perhaps that is why the allure of underwater ruins is so strong. They are not static museums. They are living mysteries, half consumed, half kept. Fragments of memory blending with the ongoing life of the sea. A diver swimming through a submerged temple is never only in the past. They are in two worlds at once, the memory of stone and the present of water. As we reflect upon the sea as tomb and archive, we must also consider what it means for us today. Our own cities line the coasts, our harbours spread across the edges of the continents. Should the waters rise again, as they surely will in some distant age, our own towers and streets may one day lie beneath the waves. The ocean may claim them, but in doing so it will keep them. Perhaps tens of thousands of years from now, others will dive into their depths and wonder who we were, just as we wonder now about those who came before. In the end, the sea is neither enemy nor friend. It is the great archivist, impartial, unyielding. It buries not to forget, but simply because that is its nature. The drowned temples of humanity are not lost, only waiting. And when we descend into them, when we swim along their streets and touch their stones, we brush against the edge of a larger story, one that began long before us and will continue long after. The ocean is our tomb and our archive. It erases and it preserves, it silences and it remembers. And in its depths, the earliest chapters of our journey still rest, patient, undisturbed, awaiting the moment when the world is ready to hear them again.